That's show business.
All right. Welcome on this wonderful Sunday evening, all of you fans of Affray Interactive and SCP-5K. We are on our steadward path to update 0.15, the next big chunk in the SCP-5K saga with much brand spanking content that you will soon be able to play through. And as we make our way towards this eventual update, which is coming soon, I can't tell you when soon, but it is coming soon, which is why we're unveiling so many interesting, spicy details. We are here for an afternoon with Corvus, SCP alum, who is going to go over some of the technical sound design. What they are working on sounds incredible from my understanding. I am a layperson. I am not good with sound, as you just saw me befuddle and struggle for the past 10 minutes to get my Discord to working, only to go through the old-fashioned. They are working on a new incredible technical sound thing where they're going to like the Matrix and they're going to have reactive sounds, and it sounds really, really cool. And they have been able to give us this time here today to talk about the work that they are doing, and I cannot wait to hear into it. And just to let you know, Corvus's preferred pronouns are they, them. You guys are usually fantastic at being respectful to developers. I just want to make sure that when we get into the Q&As later, we do use the proper pronouns. So I just want to set that initially. So Corvus, how are you doing?
Hi, I'm doing quite good. How about you?
I am doing great now that I have troubleshot. So what are we looking at here? What is this screen? Let's hear about your specialty.
Ooh. Yeah, well, this screen right now that you're looking at isn't actually all that impressive or even necessarily specific to what I do. I just kept this here because it looks nice. This is more of the screen that I'm going to be working in, which is a bit more bland, so I didn't want to start off on that. Yeah, do you want me to just sort of talk about what technical sound design means?
Yes. So I would love to hear about technical sound design, and I would also like to hear because there's some really cool stuff that was explained to me that I would love for you to explain to the audience. Of like you're doing an incredible overhaul of like the entire soundscape. Because from my understanding, SCP-5K the sound isn't dynamic, so you'll like a window, or like shoot out a window, and the glass will have this like kind of like static glass sound effect. But what you're doing is going to make it much more dynamic and 3D ranged. You're doing something like that's going to be really, really cool, right?
You're pretty close. Yeah, so I guess technical sound design. I think a lot of people here, I'm gonna guess, will have heard of what sound design is, and they know what music is, and those are to a lot of people the thing that sort of comprises game audio. It's the music and the sound design. Technical sound design lives in a world between the game engine and the asset creation, and it's basically the discipline of designing the sound, not necessarily through recording means or manipulating them in the actual waveforms, but rather how can we implement and manipulate sound live in the engine during gameplay to form the soundscape and inform our perspective of what the game's audio is. And so that in very broad terms is technical sound design. Which means that I specifically work a lot. Obviously, I have a lot of sound design expertise myself, but in this particular instance, I work in that layer between programming and getting all of the assets from the team. I will be implementing audio on the most basic level, which is just, make sure something plays in the game. But then as we get to more advanced things, I'm going to be looking at dynamic music systems, dynamic ambient systems, making sure that the rooms feel more present and manipulating audio so that it better informs gameplay. And there's a lot of things that technical sound design can do. It's hard to give an overview over all of them, but we'll endeavor to hopefully talk about a couple of things. And so that, in the broad strokes, is technical sound design. I was brought on relatively recently, and we're now basically in a process of going over all of the audio that we have in the game and really kicking it up a gear by taking advantage of a lot of features that we have not yet taken advantage of, and also introducing new systems with my help to really bring things into a more, better standing and give it more life and all of that. And that's going to be a long process. So I will say right off the bat, point 15 is going to be a step up from what point 14 was, but it's not going to be where the buck ends. Like, point 15 is the first step. And with every update, point 15.1, and then into the future, every single time, we're going to be doing more and more to revamp the audio and really get it to a pristine and high quality professional level.
Ooh, I'm so excited. So, are you telling me? And we have a super chat. Oh my God, Arc etc. has given us $2. Thank you so much, Arc etc. Yes, have you never heard of super chats?
I have. That's crazy. It's been 2 minutes.
I know. I was. It just shows you how appreciated sound design is. Arc etc. says, "Do a cartwheel." I would absolutely happily love to do a cartwheel for you, but unfortunately, I have no gymnastic skills. I could do a somersault. I could like do a somersault. I could make my bird do a cartwheel, maybe in the air. I don't have my camera on, so you wouldn't be able to see it. But thank you so much. I will figure out a way to do a cartwheel. Maybe I can look online and do like a cartwheel gesture using like emoticons signs.
Well, maybe this will work. No, it won't let me. I can't roll. I was gonna do it, but sorry. I'm sorry.
Hey, anything is a celebration. We always appreciate it when people give us cash for the good work. So thank you for your appreciation. But anyway, sorry to interrupt. You were talking about technical sound design, and I was getting excited that this is going to take SCP-5K up to the realms of like Dead Space or Resident Evil 4. Because sound design is it's interesting in the YouTube space. Like, what distinguishes like a great creator from a mediocre one is the sound design. If you have like a good microphone, it puts you leagues ahead of like someone. It's like one of the most underappreciated tech values, but also one of the most important ones. Because what shows you a mediocre student film? Oh, there's like background sound, there's fuzz in the air, all those things like immediately tell you low quality. And sound design is incredibly important for horror games like SCP-5K, as well as tactical shooters. So to have this super overhaul is going to hopefully make the game infinitely more immersive.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. I mean, sound design, it's been understood for a long time just how important sound is. There used to be, sort of for a long time, this prevailing image, especially sort of if we look at film, that the quality of the picture is the most important thing. It's not. And sound isn't either. Technically speaking, the pacing is, but sound can elevate something that, even though, not to say that this applies to SCP-5K, just to be clear on that, even if something doesn't look the best, if it sounds fantastic, you're going to be immersed on a completely different level. Um, and so that's something that I feel has really come through in the public consciousness in the last few years, that just how important that is. And there's a lot more talk about sound design, and it's so rewarding for anyone who works in game audio, who has been slaving away creating these, not just creating the assets, writing this music, and then also under the hood building a bunch of systems. It's really rewarding that that's being seen more and being discussed more openly, and that people actually resonate. Sort of look behind the curtain, because what a lot of people see sound design as people running around with microphones, which is a lot of what it is. But there's also the other, I wouldn't call it boring because I find it very exciting personally, but a different side to it that happens under the hood, where the bytes live and where we drag and put boxes into the world. And it looks like we're not doing much, but it has a great effect. So hopefully trying to build some understanding of that today.
So let us. What is this program that we have on the screen right now called that we are looking at?
Right. Yeah. What we're looking at right now is essentially the home screen of Fmod, which is a software that is referred to as audio middleware. And it's basically a way that we can implement audio and do a lot of cool things to it without having to do a lot of nitty-gritty things ourselves. Um, it's different from using audio straight in the Unreal Engine because you can just put audio into the Unreal Engine or the Unity engine, whatever engine you're using. There's usually audio capabilities built into that engine. However, depending on the engine that you're using, they're pretty limited. So in Unity, for example, you have to write a lot of things yourself. If you want any sort of dynamic thing happening, you're going to be spending a lot of time in code writing things up. Unreal is doing a lot better, especially with meta sounds that Unreal 5 has in now. But for certain designers, it's still not the best option. And so that's where audio middleware comes in. And audio middleware is something that's been created by a company who specializes in doing this stuff, and they provide a tool, a user interface in which we can create audio events, which is what they're referred to, and we can tweak them and add effects to them and make them change depending on certain parameters that we specify. And then the game engine, rather than playing audio back itself, it communicates with an interface that is provided for this audio middleware. So they can talk, and then the audio middleware will take care of managing the audio and playing it back and doing all the fun, fancy things to it. And the game doesn't have to worry quite so much about that. It just says, this is what I want to have happen, make it happen. And we have a lot more in how we can get creative with sound implementation. And so the two major ones that you might have heard of, I just saw a question in chat. What are meta sounds? I'll answer those real quick because it's kind of stepping away from middleware still. Meta sounds is a thing that was introduced in Unreal 5, which is a new sound system that they have where you can basically construct sounds out of little building bricks, basically, and you can tweak them, and it's basically akin to their blueprint system that they have, which is a visual coding system where you can put together a chain of actions by putting together nodes in a graph. And meta sounds is basically that, but for sounds. And so it's very flexible, can be tweaked very granularly, but it's still, very sort of nitty gritty. You got to really understand every single thing that you're doing in there to make things happen. So audio middleware abstracts all that a little bit more and is working on a layer that's more akin to what a lot of sound designers and composers will be used to, which is working in digital audio workstations, which is, I guess I'll put this up. This is basically what that looks like. This one isn't too impressive, but in this sort of software, we can look at sounds and we can look at other things and we can tweak them and put effects on them and change their volume. And audio middleware tries to approach that feeling so that it makes it more comfortable for sound designers and composers to use and implement audio in a creative way rather than having to understand every single thing that goes on under the hood in the engine. Audio middleware, the two most popular ones are Fmod and Wise. Wise is the one that's most commonly used throughout the industry, but that doesn't mean that Fmod's no good. Fmod can be used very effectively, and it's a really awesome tool. Don't ask me if it stands for anything, because I think it does. Fmod, just capital FMOD. And you can actually, I'm going to be showing a bunch of things in Fmod. You can actually go online, just search it up and download it for yourself, and they have an example project that you can look at in case you're curious enough to play around with it yourself. So keep that in mind going forward. But yes, this is the tool in which we specify, we put all of the beautiful assets that the sound design team makes, we put it all in here, and we author events, is what it's called, basically specifying the behavior of every sound that goes in the game. And then in Unreal, we make sure to implement and make sure that we make these events happen. But this is where it all starts, the whole journey of a sound from just a waveform to happening in the engine at a specific point in time and space. I sent that with a lot of grandeur. I don't know why.
Well, I think it deserves that grandeur. This is where it starts. So take us through the workflow. Let's say I've got a new sound effect that I want to put in 5K, like a rat-a-tat-tat-tat-tat-tat-tat-tat. Rat-a-tat-tat-tat-tat-tat-tat-tat. How would that rat-a-tat-tat-tat-tat-tat-tat make its way into the game?
Right. So that's actually a good question. I should have recorded that rat-a-tat-tat, but I didn't. So let's see if I can just find something else to use really quickly somewhere in my files. Here we go. There's a silly file that I have that I can just use for this. So this is how we start. We have an asset. We have a .wav file from the sound design team. It's been made to the specifications of something new that we want in the game. And now we go into Fmod, and we're going to say, we're going to make a new event for this. We're going to author an event that has this sound play. And so the first question would typically be, where do we put it? We're going to ignore that for a moment because I'm going to get back to that. So for simplicity's sake, I'm just going to right click, and we have, I hope you can see that, by the way. I think I'm sharing my whole screen, but
yeah, I see new 2D action, new
pop-up.
3D action, new 2D timeline, new 3D timeline, right? New event?
Awesome. Yes. Okay, so this is what we do. We say we want a new event, and then we can specify what exactly we want. For now, I'm going to stick to just 2D timeline, and we'll get back to what that means a little later. And now we're asked to give the event a new name, and in this case, I'm going to call this, I don't know, stream event. So there we go. And now in here, you can see that we have this empty sort of layout with one audio track and a master track. And if you recall, going back to the DAW, you might see that it looks sort of familiar. We've got all these tracks with audio on them, and Fmod is structured in exactly the same way, which is why it's so appealing for sound designers and composers to use. And now we want to have our sound play. So I'm going to drag the WAV file over from my folder. I'm just going to drag it in here. And it appears right there. I'm going to just click out and click back in so it zooms in. I'm actually going to do that again. And here we have our sound event. And I can actually already hit play inside of Fmod and listen to it. And I hope this audio goes through. Hope that worked. Feedback. Did that happen? Did that?
I think I heard like a little cracking sound effect.
Awesome. Okay. If I need to turn it up, I can, because I actually have it turned down kind of low. So there we go. This is our sound. That's the sound that we got from the sound design team, or just whatever. I recorded this at some point a long time ago, just me throwing a dart at like an electronic dartboard. What the sound is really doesn't matter for this demonstration, but here we go. And it appears just like that as a single instrument. That's what it's referred to. And that's pretty much, if that's all we want, we're pretty much done, almost. What we're going to do now is we're going to right click on the event again, and we're going to assign it to a bank. Every event in the game consists of audio assets and behavior, and every event needs to be associated with what is called a bank. And a bank is basically a collection of events that can then be loaded and unloaded depending on what we currently need in the game. So we might have banks for the main menu music or the UI sounds, which would be constantly loaded, but then we might have banks that only have sound effects in them that are relevant to a certain area, like Antarctica. And we wouldn't load that bank until we actually go into Antarctica. It's a way for us to organize and optimize performance and memory usage. Right here, it doesn't really matter because this is a tiny sound, and Fmod is really good at compressing even big wave files into tiny, tiny amounts of data, which is gonna, you don't even notice it. It's incredible what compression algorithms can do. Maybe I'll get to that a bit later. But for now, I'm gonna just pop this in the master bank, which is the main bank that's always loaded. And now you might have seen that this little hashtag unassigned has gone away. That means it's now assigned, and we can now actually go and build our bank. So I'm going to just save. I'm going to build the master bank, right click and build. And that happened pretty quickly. And now our event inside of Fmod is complete. If we now head over to Unreal Engine, it just faded away. Dang it. I'm going to make it happen again. On the right side, it says reloaded Fmod banks. And that means that it's now got the latest version of the banks that we just created. So we should be able to find our event. So let's see if we can do that. If we scroll down, right now I'm in the Fmod folder that has all of our events. It's a bit messy down here. There we go. There's our stream event. And now, depending on what we want, we can actually just drag it in, and it's going to create an ambient sound, which basically just means that when the game starts, this starts playing, and it's just sort of there in the world and just sort of plays by itself. Because this sound is a one-shot, which means that it plays once and then it stops, we might not actually hear it, but let's just give it a shot anyway. I'm going to hit play, and if things have gone well, we should hear a little bit of a dart sound just sort of in our ears when the game starts.
Let's see it in practice.
There we go. We heard it. Obviously, not great because it just sort of happens, but we definitely heard it, which means we definitely succeeded on our mission from getting it from the audio asset all the way into the game. Now, that's pretty boring. That's, it's cool. It's a dart sound that's just sort of there and it plays in your ears, whatever. We can now make it more interesting. And so we can go back to Fmod, and now we can do a lot of different things to it depending on what we need. Right now, the sound is 2D, which means that it just sort of plays in both of your ears in the stereo of your headphones, and it doesn't get positioned in the world in any way whatsoever. That might be fine for UI sounds or for music, things like that. But with this, which might be an impact on a surface, we want it to be spatialized. We want it to be a 3D sound. And so all we have to do for that is we add an effect down here in the master bus, and we add a spatializer. And so you might have noticed, you can see on the left and the right here, we have input and output, and those are just our meters that show us how loud the sound is. And right now they're both showing 2 channels. When I add the spatializer, they gain a bunch of channels over here because we're actually mixing the game in 5.1 surround sound. And so now you can see the sound takes up all these channels. And if I go up to this little view up here, I can actually preview myself positioning the sound in the world. So if I move it over here, you now hear it to your right, to your left. And then if you were in a surround sound setup, you'd be hearing it behind you accordingly. And so that's the gist of that. So we can actually now go and build our bank again. And with any luck, if I turn facing this way, we should hear it on our right. And we did. So that worked out. Cool. But now we want to maybe do things like making sure that it plays reverb. And this is where we get into things that we have already set up in the game over the course of just developing it. We have some presets that we can do. So all I need to do is just add a preset effect. I go to mix attenuation and I just add generic attenuation. And now this adds a preset that already has a bunch of specified behavior on it. I guess I'll see if I can explain sort of what this does. These 2 things right here are for occlusion, which means when a sound is behind a wall, it muffles it. And this one in the middle here is for actually sending to a reverb. And what sending means is that the audio signal basically goes through a chain. It goes from this event into a mixing structure and then all the way going through that until it gets to your speaker. And the mixing structure looks like this. This is all the mixing buses that we have in the game. There's a lot of them, so it's a bit, kind of all over the place, but it's going to make a lot more sense if I show what's going on the left side here. This is the routing. We have our master bus. This is basically what goes directly to our speakers. And then we have a lot of side sub-buses underneath that we can tweak individually. And so our stream event right now is just sort of sitting on the master bus, but we can actually drag it somewhere where it's more appropriate. So we can actually drag this into SFX for sound effects. Cool. And now when we're doing this little thing right here, what we're doing is we're sending some of the audio signal from the stream event is now going to the sound bus, but it's also going to this thing. And this is a send, which is internally going to do a couple of things. It's going to compress the signal a bit in case we have a lot of volume. And then it's going to send it again to what is called a return. And that's all the way up here. And on here, we have a reverb effect. And so if you imagine this as almost like a river, at this point right here, some of the water keeps going and flowing into the SFX bus, into the master bus, into your speakers. And some of it is being diverted to here, being processed through a reverb, and then it also flows back into the master bus. And so now we have the two signals combining, one, the dry signal from the event itself, and one, the wet signal that came through the reverb. Yes, the name's actually dry and wet. It's, I don't know, sound design lingo. But let's see if I can make this extremely noticeable, because if I audition this inside of Fmod right now, you can actually hear the reverb a bit. If I turn this whole thing off, just dry by itself, and if I turn this back on, you can hear that there's a bit of a Hall effect on that. I can actually go into the mix and bus structure and drag this thing all the way up so we can really hear it. There we go. And so now we've made a really basic sound. In a lot of cases, this is actually all that we have to do for things like impacts and stuff like that. That just sort of happen. We just want to spatialize them, and then we want to add some behavior that sends it to a reverb and also muffles it if it's occluded. So I can actually simulate the occlusion up here by dragging on this little occlusion parameter. And you can see that it changes the curve down there. So if there's no occlusion, just plays like that, and if there's full occlusion, it gets muffled. And this is something that is the power of middleware, because we can very easily set these parameters up that we can control from within the game, and it tweaks the sound as it's playing. And that's really powerful, because we don't have to worry about doing anything crazy like exporting this sound once and then exporting it again, but muffled and kind of trying to blend between the two, but keeping it all synchronized. We don't have to worry about it. We just have our sound, and we can process it dynamically right here in Fmod and have it happen right there in gameplay. So let's see. I'm going to drag the reverb fader back all the way up so we can hopefully hear the effect when I hit play this time. I'm going to be standing here over again, and I'm going to start, and hopefully we can hear some reverb. Yeah, we didn't hear much because we're outside. That's another thing. The reverb itself looks like this. These are the settings on the reverb, but those settings might not apply for every in. And so for different spaces in the game, we have reverb snapshots, and this is a small look at some of the ones that we have. And what these do is allow us to specify, if I click on one, I'm now looking at the medium room. If I click on this, you can see that some of these are sort of blank, but some of them are like, scoped in, as it's called in Fmod. And they are changing the values of our reverb depending on which of these snapshots is playing. And so this is a mechanism that we can use to then alter what reverb we're actually hearing depending on what location we're in the game. And so for that, let's take a step back, or maybe I'm getting ahead of myself. I guess maybe I should ask if there's any questions, because I'm going fast, I'm noticing.
No, but we could definitely see if there's any questions. But you're going into a lot of really great, fascinating detail that I think does not really get shown off that much, but it seems incredibly important for the world of game design. If I'm not talking, it's usually because
Absolutely.
it's like you're spitting fire. Yeah. Do any of you have any questions about any of the stuff that Corvus has shown? So we have a question from Bobcat Power.
How do you get sounds as sound design? What exactly do you mean by that? Are you talking about where to actually get the sound assets that we're using from? Right. That's a whole process that, I mean, it can be, for us specifically, we have a team. go out and for every update we size sounds on their computer, and they can all put it together in a DAW and modulate it with effects and anything to shape the sound into exactly what we need. And that's the step that happens sort of before I start touching anything. That's the step of good and true sound design, where we just go out and record, and we come back and we tweak and capture it on, out on the site or wherever, to make the sound that we want to hear in the game. And then from there, that's where I pick up to make sure it actually happens in the game and behaves in particular ways depending on what we need. I hope that answers the question. I'm not going to go into the actual sound design part too much in this stream because, number one, that's not actually my key source, my key area of where I'm working in this project particularly. But also, there's been a couple of streams actually with the lead sound designer Pfeiffer, and I think with Cools as well, who have sort of shone some light onto the whole topic of sound design. So if you're curious about that, you can definitely look at those. I think those are on YouTube somewhere. I watch them. I watch them. So
yeah, Piper is always a fantastic source, but that's an interesting distinction. So Piper kind of creates all the sound effects while you're sort of using your software to make sure that you're using the software to make sure that the sound effect plays properly in the game environment to the maximum degree and is the most suitable for the player, if I'm correct, right?
that is absolutely right. It's this beautiful balance of sort of making, first of all, making audio even happen, because like without this step, the world would be silent, and so that's, it seems simple, like all of what I just did is really simple, but it does so much just to get you started off on a point where you can actually walk around the world and hear things around you. And then it's taking that to the next step of adding more complex behavior to the sound in order to make it really settle in with the world or behave in a particular way depending on what is happening in the game. If a door is opening a certain way, or if a character is moving a certain way, if we're listening to a sound coming from another player that we're playing with, or an enemy even, or if we're making the sound ourselves, and all of the implications that that has in terms of, because it's not just a question of we want to hear sound, we also want to make sure that it's clear, there's clarity in the mix. That's a whole nother thing, where it's like, we have a lot of sound playing, how do we emphasize which sounds, and how do we provide an even level that does not overcomplicate the soup, essentially, but also isn't too sterile. So there's a huge, huge, range to this discipline. But yeah, at the very basic, it's just making sure that sounds happen, and they happen in a way that immerses the player, but also produces the result that the audio team is looking for, because there's a lot of ways that you can do that. This one right here that I've got here, which is just an ambient sound that's sort of positioned in the world, that's super basic, but you can go further from this, where you can have complicated systems that put sounds at specific locations in the map, depending on what the player is, or things like that. And those are all systems that we're going to start building over the next few updates to really crank up and make the whole world feel more alive. We've actually got started on a couple of things this update. Maybe I'll go into those. One of them concerns the starting area of the game, the interrogation rooms. Some really awesome stuff that we did there. Hopefully I'll get to that in a bit. But yeah, if there's no other questions, I can actually.
We do have a few
Yes.
questions from the YouTube. We have this is less a question,
right.
but Ship Mickey McRee says, question: do you know that you guys are awesome? Aw, give yourself a hug.
Aww,
And Arc etc. asks, a game that
you're
has
breathtaking.
exactly. No, you're breathtaking. A game that has a perfect blend between ambience and in-game music you should look at is Left 4 Dead. As a professional, do you have any thoughts on Left 4 Dead's sound design?
Ooh. Left 4 Dead is amazing. It's I can't even begin to because there's so much about it that is so beautiful and that continues to inspire the sound team and myself to this day. It's kind of crazy because it came out so long ago, but it has such an impact and it does so many things so well that it continues to influence us and makes us want to be able to reach that sort of level of, this is what we want to do. This is the level that we want to be at. So no, it's great, and let it be known that we will strive. We will do everything in our power to dethrone. No, to get to a higher level, such as that we may never reach it. Uh, Alas, we're not masters yet, but
Well,
we will try our very hardest,
it is
and we
always
are, to really get things.
it is always better to aim for the stars, because even if you don't reach them, maybe you'll land among them. So having those lofty heights of Valve and their peak creative height is always a great goal to shoot for. So I would love
Yes,
to
so long as you manage your expectations.
One thing I would love to hear, so I know that you're kind of doing a big sound overhaul, but what will we be able to hear in the up 0.15 update versus the overall bigger work you're doing that we'll see later on down the road?
So things that you're going to be able to immediately tell?
Yes.
I think what you're going to be immediately able to tell is that the mix is improving a lot. There were a lot of cases in 0.14 in which sound at times was sort of lacking, and then at other times it was very overpowering. There might be some areas where there's like a lot of fire going on and all you could hear was fire, or you might be walking around certain lights and all you would hear is the buzzing of those lights. There's a lot of that has been cleaned up and that we're continuing to work to clean up. Same thing goes for, because this is obviously huge for this game, and I apologize if there's things going on in the background. I have the window open because it's hot and there's children outside, so I apologize deeply. But obviously really important, firearms, and being able to hear those in a way that doesn't burst your eardrums, especially in contexts where a lot of enemies or a lot of you in the party playing, you don't want your ears to be blown off when there's more than 2 gunshots going on at the same time. So those are big things that we're currently working on improving on and really making a difference. It's going to be something that's assets are going to be replaced piecemeal over time. There's a whole thing that we're planning on doing where we go area to area and really polish everything up. But the key thing that you're definitely, and there's some of that you can definitely already hear in 0.15, especially in some of the new stuff that I don't even know if I can show you, but there's some great stuff that everyone's really proud of. But one of the definite things that you're going to be able to hear is that the mix is going to be a lot cleaner, and hopefully it's going to help you immerse yourself a lot better, as well as be able to tell what is going on around you. So that's one of the big key things that we're focusing now, and that we're going to continue to focus on every single update. And every time we add new stuff, we're going to have to go over the mix again, because we just added a bunch of new things. We're going to have to make sure that all of that stuff sits in nicely with everything that's already there. And so this is going to be an ongoing process every single time, self-checking, reviewing, and making sure that we're staying at the top of our game.
So
hopefully people will notice that. If not, I will be very sad. No, no kidding.
Well, when you play the update 0.15, be sure to listen very carefully and give Corvus lots of compliments in the Fray chat. They will be looking for them to be validated for their work. But we also have some questions from the YouTube stream. So Zinthu the Circle asks, have you ever had fun with the sounds, like make an SCP have clown sounds? Have you ever done any goofy stuff? Just for funs and giggles.
We do goofy stuff all the time. I myself have not yet had the, I guess, benefit of being able to be too goofy on this. I've been taking, because there's so much work that um, has been happening that I can still get into, but there's so much that's been happening that's kind of been difficult to goof off, for me at least personally. But I've heard a lot of stories from the sound team of just sort of goofing around with certain sounds. And there's a bunch of little goofs that I found in the Fmod project, because one of the big things that I had to do is restyle Fmod project. So if I just go back to it really quickly, um, you have a structure here where it's like pretty clear what's going on, I hope. Antarctica, Area 12, Act 1, Global. And if I go into these, there's a bunch of categories, and if I go into them further, more categories, and then we get to the actual events. All of the structure to really clarify what things are and where they go and what they belong to. All of this stuff is relatively new. When I got on board, this was one of my big tasks, is cleaning this up, because the Fmod project before this was a little bit disorganized. And so in order to make sure that we are working efficiently, a big task was cleaning all of this up, which basically meant for me, I had to go through every single Fmod event, and there's thousands, and make sure that I understand what they do, I understand how they're used in the game, and then move them to a new location, give it a proper name, and maybe even change its behavior internally accordingly. That was a huge task. And so with a lot of the events that are in this project, if I click flat, and you can actually see all of them, this is all of the events that we have in the game. I'm just scrolling, and there's a bunch. There's a lot of stuff, a lot of weapons especially. Um, so I'm intimately familiar with a lot of these events at this point. And I have come across a couple of little goofy ones that I like, what is this doing here? But sound design team, everyone likes to have fun. I recall on the last major project that I worked on, there's goofs that you did. Usually they wouldn't see the light of day in terms of going out into the public, although you do sometimes add some sound effect Easter eggs. But a lot, especially during the development process, it just sort of, what if I replaced this button sound with my friend saying something about how their software just crashed, and it would be very funny. So we all have a slightly weird sense of humor, but we have fun with it. It's kind of funny because sound has so much control over the game, and a joke that keeps sort of popping up is that we could totally ruin the experience of SCP-5K if we just replaced every single sound with fart sounds. It would be funny for like 5 minutes, but we could do some pretty devastating stuff if we let our goofs get out of hand. So
So we do
gotta be serious.
we do have another question from R14 Genie. Corvus, I know what you have done in SCP Unity. You have gained even more experience from that. So push once again the thing sound to the next level in SCP-5K. That is another interesting distinction you have amongst the Affray talent, is that you have previously worked on other SCP projects. So you've kind of been ingrained in the community a bit deeper than some of the other people who bring other background experiences.
Yeah, I haven't actually I haven't mentioned that yet. But yeah, I used to. This is a while ago. If anyone even remembers here, I shout out to that one person. Um, I used to work on SCP Unity before it was canceled by the person. I won't go into that. That's a whole other can of worms I'm not even going to go into. But during the time that it was in development, I was essentially lead sound designer and lead composer, and I took care of the entirety of game audio for the project. I sort of joined at some point, just sort of, I want to do some sound effects, and it sort of escalated very quickly when it became clear that there's so much opportunity that was untapped. And so that's sort of my background coming from, in the SCP community. I also sort of provided sounds at one point for SCP Containment Breach. I've worked with the Volgan and Fallen Foundry on some of their SCP content, which was more movies than games.
Ooh.
So I've been here a while. The background music that you hear in like Volgan's videos, I wrote that. So there you go, I guess. Not to blow myself up or anything. But yeah, SCP Unity, I had a lot of the same tasks that I have now, except a bit further because I also wrote all of the music. I recorded and designed all of the sounds, but then a lot of time was spent exactly here inside of Fmod. And when I joined SCP Unity, they were actually not using Fmod at the time. They were using some sort of internal Unity thing. And so a big thing that I did is overhaul the entire audio inside of the game to use Fmod and take advantage of the things that Fmod provides. And so in a way, it's almost like I'm coming full circle because I'm not doing the exact same thing here, but I'm definitely able to use that experience that I've had, really revamping the whole the structures inside of Fmod and building tools and knowing what tools we need. That's really going to help the project go further. And I think everyone's excited. I'm really excited. Everyone's very excited. I'm very happy, and it's gonna be better than ever because obviously since SB Unity, it's been a few years and I've learned along the way. I never stopped. So um, I'm hoping we can do real good stuff, and I know we will. We already are. So I guess that's me and my background.
Well, it's good to hear that you've worked with like distinguished creators like the Volgan. I'm sorry to hear the SCP Unity, but I guess that's what happens when you've got like items that are in the kind of, the good part. Gooms was talking about, and he's probably here silently. Is like the great part about indie space is it's like, yeah, we're punks and we're gonna be able to do everything and blah blah blah, and we're gonna bring the world. The other part is that don't necessarily have the discipline that you'd expect from like a professional production crew. So sometimes, as Mr. Beast's Empire is learning, when you play fast and loose, there are consequences that can happen when you don't have a professional environment. So it's great to see that you were able to cut your teeth in that environment, and now Fray, that AA space that you are getting to show your talents off and revamp this game the best it could be. We do have another question from Zinthu the Circle on YouTube. Would it be possible that when the game fully releases on April Fools, the sounds or something will change? So is it possible to do an April Fools sound revamp where everything is clown shoes or maybe Michael Winslow sound effects?
I like the idea. Interestingly enough, it would actually be a little more difficult than one would imagine because there's not necessarily inside of mod one big replace all sounds with a clown shoes button. So it would actually take a tremendous amount of time going through everything and making sure that all works without destroying what's already there. So I wouldn't expect that for April Fools next year, unless I get started on that in the background. No, but no promises.
Darn you! Showing that having fun takes a lot of work and time and effort, and kind of justifying why April Blizzard no longer does their April Fool's jokes anymore. But that is interesting to hear that like it would take. It's not just like you push in the button and throw in the sound effects. It does take a lot of time to like have everything work properly.
Mm-hmm.
Bobcat Power was suggesting April
Unless
Fool's.
there's more questions.
Yep. Let's see here.
Oh, where all the SCPs have your voice. We
Yeah.
can do that.
I don't know if everyone would loved it, but it would certainly be very, very funny to see. Then this isn't so much a question, but a comment.
Would have a thing or two to say about that.
Yeah, I think he would. Poor guy would have a heart attack. Plot twist. Ship McCree asks, plot twist. He's been inserting audio cognitive hazards to make Volgan's videos so immersive. So you've been making it even better.
Oh, just a little subliminal hypnosis in the audio. Don't worry about it. It's fine.
It's what all the top creators do to make sure that you
reminds
keep.
Me of.
Oh, sorry. You were saying reminds you of.
Say again.
Oh, you were saying it reminds you of something. Can you hear me?
I don't think I caught that. I think you're cutting out a little bit on the
Yeah,
discord and all of
I
this.
need to have a talk with Verizon. I think I'm gonna have to pay $160 to move my router so it's a little bit closer to my computer. I think that's a big problem with my the issues. A lot of issues I
Yeah.
encounter. But you were saying something reminded you of something. Did that go through or? No, I'm disconnecting. Oh no!
Little Easter eggs, yeah. No, the idea of having something subliminal reminds me of the little tricks that some people might be familiar from with Doom, where the composer painted funny images into the waveforms.
Wait, I have not heard about this. What is this about the Doom subliminal things in the waveforms? Were they like
What?
Satan symbols?
Well, it's not. It's not really subliminal. It's that the composer Mick Gordon had some fun when writing the music and used software to insert spectrographic images into some of the audio, which is basically that when you look at audio through a spectrograph, which is where it like draws the entirety of the sound like per frequency. It's kind of wonky, but it shows you exactly where in the sound certain frequencies are and what frequencies are the loudest. You can paint images into that, and so he had some fun. I think he painted like a 666 somewhere and things like that, and a lot of people freaked out about it, and it was very funny.
Oh, that's amazing! It's literally Satan in your earworms. I guess if that was demanded of 5K, what subliminal messages would you want to have in 5K's music?
Ooh, that's tough. For anyone who ever sees the splash screen, there's a couple of interesting scribblings in there. I could probably see those being placed, in a few places. But from what I know, and no, this is not confirmation, there may already be a couple of those messages somewhere, but I don't know where. So happy searching.
There you go. For all you SCP fans who like to enjoy augmented reality games, there you go. You have a quest to keep you busy between updates. What are the hidden images in the audio files? Ooh, you'll have to go, and maybe then you'll get a clue. So, how did you learn? How did you get in? This seems like such a very interesting, very crucial area. How did you get started? Was it just sort of like messing around on computers? How did you learn the skills of technical audio design?
It's actually a really good question. A question that I actually ask myself relatively frequently, and I'm actually gonna just so we have something to look at over here. There we go. It started when I was pretty young. I must have been probably 13, 14, roundabout, is when interest and sort of ability to be able to experiment with audio really manifested. Um, and I don't really know what led from one thing to the next, but I just grew super interested in sound in video games, and I always loved playing with little sort of because back in the day, um, Unity and Unreal weren't quite so widely available yet. So I had this sort of others game engine that was written in C++, and it was kind of janky, but I kind of sort of play with it on my computer, and that was just fun to do. And then I just got involved in just a couple of like small community things, fandoms, just sort of people looking to make fan games. And I just got involved in that, and from there it really became sort of a research thing, of trying to understand, okay, what can make this, what can really make sure that, what are the tools that can bring audio to a standard that is really dynamic and really flexible. And I don't even remember how I stumbled across it, but at some point I just became intimately familiar with Fmod, very early on. Um, like I say, probably 14 years old, I first played with Fmod for the first time. Um, and just sort of kind of grew fond with it because I from coming from DAWs and sort of understanding how that worked, it was really easy to get started for me, and so from there I just learned how to use it, and for a long time it was just sort of knowing how to use it on a sort of basic level. But as you grew more, or as I grew more familiar with all the individual features, it became easier to see more complex solutions to problems. And that didn't really ever take off in sort of the fan game phase. It was always pretty basic, but I always had an understanding that there was so much more complexity that was possible in terms of things like dynamic music and things like that. And then when it came around to SCP Unity, that's when that really started taking off. Because, like I said, at the time, it was sort of using a separate sound system, and that one was miles behind what Fmod can do at the most basic level. And so it was a suggestion of mine very early on to try to move away from the Unity internal thing and go to Fmod instead. And I sort of just spearheaded it by myself because really there was no one on the team who could have much, not to say have much of a say. Like they didn't really quite understand. I could explain why it's a good idea, but then no one else could really take it and then go off and do it. So I kind of had to be the one to actually make it sort of happen, and I sort of started trying things behind the scenes, just sort of starting from ground zero of just saying this is the audio in the game that we have right now. Now use Fmod to replicate exactly what this does, and then build on from there. And as that progressed, it's interesting because as you learn, as you do more, you just unlock more complex topics as you go. At least I find that to be the case for myself in a lot of cases where it's just I'm doing something and then I just get curious about one more complex thing and I go do that, and then that unlocks like paths in my brain that spur off and go into all sorts of crazy directions. Um, to where now I'm building some sort of system that can have the reverb do certain things in these locations, but it's also flexible enough to be mixed like this. And it's nothing that I ever thought I would be doing at the start, but it just became ingrained in me. And so at this point, it's a lot of it is just sort of intuition from understanding how everything works. It's a lot of it, at least for me, it is the case that a lot of it is just understanding all every little nitty gritty detail that Fmod does, and understanding every little nitty little gritty. Speaking is difficult. Every detail of what Unreal is able to do, and being able to put those together conceptually in your head, and form solutions that way. Um, because that's what really gets you to be able to create more complex and interesting game audio solutions. Because you can have things very basic like what I have here, where it's just, it's a sound and it's spatialized and it has reverb on it and that's it. But then being able to understand, well, actually, we can check things in Unreal to let us know the certain state of something, and then we can now use that to inform something in Fmod, which can then inform something else somewhere else. And just having that in your brain is probably the best thing in order to be able to do this kind of work. Because there's a lot of structures that you can learn of, like, well, I understand this basic structure and I know how to do it every single time. Like, how do I build an efficient sort of naming structure? How do I build an efficient mixing structure? But every project has its unique sort of challenges. And if you know every single thing as much as possible about what you're doing, then you'll be able to find a solution somehow. And so I guess that's sort of how that happened. Not really a clear answer on how I learned it because it just sort of happened. It's just sort of I kept digging and digging and digging and just sort of experimenting by myself. And then a lot of it is accredited to doing as well. Because if you're just sort of experimenting, that's fine. But really, you got to go off and do. And so for me, that was a lot of that was SCP Unity because it was just like, okay, you're in a production environment, make this happen. And that is a big driving force to learning on how to use these tools and just getting that all in your brain.
Uh,
So never stop. I guess if I had to be like quirky and give some sort of advice to the younger generation, never stop learning. Always try to push the envelope just a little further and see where you end up.
a great philosophy for creating and learning how to build, work with software to build the kind of experiences people want. And we have a question from YouTube for Dense CCAT. Audio related question: is using free sounds from the internet without audio settings in Unreal Engine okay? I'm forcing directionally thing every time.
Um, if you're, I'm guessing this is in the context of you're developing your own game, and you want to have sounds in your game, and I guess you're asking if it's what you're doing of just putting them in Unreal is fine. Totally. We're using these tools, Fmod, and all of these complicated things because that's what we sort of need at our level to be able to really get into the fine detail and tweaking it and making it all dynamic. But if you're starting out and you're working on a small project, a lot of times it's perfectly fine to not go and use Fmod or things like that. Granted, there's a lot of benefit to using it if you understand how to use it. But if you just want to get some simple sounds in your game, you can put them in Unreal just fine, and you can have them be directional, and you can use that. And whenever you're ready, whenever you want to take the next step to bring up to a higher level, you can go off and do your research into Fmod or Wise at that point. And really, it just sort of depends on what you feel comfortable with. Now, I should say, saying that, this is a question also of like production size. So in our case, we have a huge production, we have a huge game. We got to make sure that it sounds exactly right. If we were doing it all in Unreal Engine with the Unreal Engine 4 tools, it would not be anywhere near as good as what it is now, even. Um, so at some point, it just becomes an inevitability that you need to use more advanced tools. But if you're doing a small game and you're starting out, don't beat yourself up over you're not using the crazy awesome tool that's currently being presented, because that might not be even what you need in that moment right now. So get familiar with the tools that you want to use. And if Fmod intrigues you, like I said, you can download it for free. There's a bunch of tutorials out there, um, and I bet you can get up and running pretty quickly. But if Unreal sounds work for you, use those. And the matter of using free sounds from the internet, perfectly fine too, as long as you make sure to check your licensing terms. There's a bunch of websites out there that let you download sounds for free, and you can use them either without crediting anyone, or you have to credit someone specifically. But doing that in itself is no problem at all. It's, obviously, I always recommend if you can, go out. You might not even need a microphone, but go out and record. Just use your phone, capture some audio wherever you are, of whatever. And you can see how you can get creative with that very quickly. But, using sounds from the internet, if it's from a proper source, perfectly fine. So I wouldn't worry about that.
Uh, he thanks you for your answer with lots of hearts. Um, Arc etc. asks, after 5K is fully released and a couple of DLCs come out, are you going to make any other games? I'm sure Afraid would love to make, is definitely going to be making more games. I'm sure SCP Josie is in the works. There's like one unannounced project that eventually maybe see the light of day, but I'm sure that there will be many more games from Afraid. And ooh, this is a spicy question. What are your thoughts on sounds made by AI? Especially like, have you seen those like the Suna AI where you can make songs?
I have, unfortunately. Um, I hope, I think that word choice is going to let you know pretty quickly what my stance on the whole thing is. Um, why do you need sounds made by AI? Just go out and record a sound. There's so many. The world is filled with them. No, I personally, this, I should clarify, this is not necessarily the position of the company. I don't know what the position of the company is on this, and individuals inside the company might have different views. My personal views is that I find generative AI of that kind very destructive and very frightening. Um, And yeah, I don't really know what to say more uh, without getting very heated. But really, if you think about it, especially with like sounds, um, sure, depending on what you're going for, if you're going for something that's extremely processed and has a lot of effects on it, you might not have the skill or the tools immediately available to you to make it happen. But those tools are becoming more and more accessible very quickly. Audacity, which is a fun sort of topic because it used to be sort of small scale and kind of janky, and to some degree, as far as I can tell, it still is. But their team is making a lot of effort to bring it up to a much higher standard by improving the effects that you can do within Audacity and the tools that you can use. And everyone nowadays has a microphone usually in their pocket. Your phone has a microphone. It might not be the greatest quality, but you can go out and you can record anything you want. You can go, if you're in a city, record the traffic, record yourself banging on something. And that's really such a joyous process that you'll have much more fun and you'll be much happier with your result, I think, than if you use AI. But I think that also just depends on the person. That's my personal opinion on it. I think leaving aside the whole problems of it taking jobs and things like that, I think it's a big waste of space. Um, and there are a lot more tools available for free, even um, that you can use to create your own audio and shape it in the way that you want to have it be. Let
Very.
alone that to keep this on the topic of technical sound design, just because that's just the audio asset. Right now, there's no one who can do all this stuff inside of Fmod for you. So, hey,
No AI to replace that yet. No, I think that's a sentiment that's shared by a lot of the talent. I think as of right now, Affray has a no AI policy, which I completely understand and can see why experienced professionals are against it. Although part of me is sad that I will never be able to share the cringy Pokemon SCP rap that I made in Suno AI for shits and giggles. But yeah, I understand why it's kind of like an affront to all the good work you do. Especially in sound, where it's like so processed and compressed, and it's kind of like this weird abomination. Um, so we also had another question from a Russian individual whose name I can't pronounce because it is in the Russian language. How do you record sounds of the weapon? So I think I don't know if you've seen our social media, but we do sometimes we do field scouting where we actually fire weapons on the range to get the sound effects. Not always, but so there is a decent amount of Foley work and actual in-field sound recordings. From your experience, what do you think of the sound effects that have been gathered by Pfeiffer in the wild as a technical sound designer?
I think they're great. They sound truly fantastic. And so, like one of the big things that I heard is that the weapons sound great, and I couldn't agree more that weapons sound amazing. Um, the one problem from the perspective of technical sound design is that they're sort of baked in the sense that the entire shot is sort of one sound, and we don't have a lot of flexibility inside of Fmod or inside during gameplay to tweak how the sound is um, balanced, by which I mean a gunshot consists of multiple different elements that make it up, and one part of that, for example, is the mechanical layer, which is just the actual mechanism of the gun itself. And that's something that you, in mixing during gameplay, might actually want to turn down for things or for people who are not you. You, as the player, want to definitely be able to hear it, but you might not want to be able to hear it so clearly as part of the sound when it's coming from an enemy that's really far away from you. And so that right now is actually sort of a problem that we're going to be addressing. We're going to go over all our gun audio again and split things up nice and neatly so that we can actually tweak the volumes of individual elements during gameplay as we need it. That's something that's going to be coming and happening over the next few updates. You might not even notice it immediately, but it will happen. So that is something that is going to be happening to the weapons. Besides that, they're I should emphasize again, they're great. This is not that it makes them bad, but they're great. They could be more flexible, and they will be. So.
Well, that is always great. The improvement, getting towards the dream of the most comprehensive SCP experience that 5K promises to be. And this the audio revamp is a great step towards that vision. Because I imagine what happens to a lot of SCP projects is people will have like pie in the sky ambitions of what they want to do, but like, these sessions just go to show you that you can't just like blink and then have like a tactical FPS with immersive weapons and great gunplay and SCPs that are all properly modeled happen in an instant. It takes a lot of blood, sweat, and pixels to make these all come together.
Sure does. I neglected to, while I was talking, I realized I could have actually shown what an event for a gun looks like. I've actually pulled one up right now.
Ooh, yeah.
Gunshot of the Cold 1911. This one is not one that has been fully separated out yet. So right now we've just got body and tail, but as you can see, there's already some sort of separation going on. Up here we have the body of the shot itself. Which is not playing because I have to solo this. There we go. Let me actually go over into the mixer and turn the reverb off just so it's a bit more clear. There we go. That's the actual body of the shot itself. And then we also have a tail, which is just the way that it reverberates based on where we are in the world, either indoors or outdoors. And we can change which one plays by changing this parameter up here, is outside, true or false. And now this is not something that like I'm doing right now, tweaking by hand. That's not something that we do because that would be ridiculous if we tweaked all of these by hand every single time it happens in the game. That's why we have an automated system that I can actually show sort of right now. This is our testing map. Let's go and turn off all the volumes. Let's hide them. Some of them are still visible because they don't, they don't play no games. But I've just enabled showing only ambient audio volumes. If I turn this, let's see. Forgot it was Alt. Okay, cool. Actually, that makes it worse. Okay, let's stay in lit. We can see that there's sort of a faint yellow line right here that I can just select. And if I go into this mode, you can actually see what's going on. There's a big giant box. This is an ambient volume that we use in the game in a lot of different places. There's a lot of these in the world to specify the parameters of a space that we're in. And that means what is the reverb, some additional parameters, and also what does the space sound like. So just the ambience overall that doesn't come from any particular point in the world, but just sort of exists around you. The room tone or the soundscape, as it might be referred to. And so right here, this is the ambient volume that just sort of encompasses the whole map. It works on a priority system. As I zoom in here, there's going to be another one here that you can see. If I select this one models how it sounds like inside of this building. And it's actually got a slightly higher priority than the other one, which means that when we're outside, we are applying the parameters from this giant volume. And when we go into this one, it has a higher priority, so we use those parameters instead. And with this, like I said, we can already tweak the reverb, and one part of that is also, and this is important for the guns, being able to tweak and say whether we're outside or not. We use the actor tags for that. Right now, down here, there's nothing in the tags, but if I click on the big one, you can see that there's a tag down here that says is outside, and that lets our audio system know to set this parameter to true, and that's how we switch whether we hear the outside or the indoor tail in the gunshot. And so the tail, if we're inside, just how it sounds like that, and if we're outside, get those really nice reverberations. And,
Ooh.
this is modulated depending on where the sound happens based on these ambient volumes. And so if you put it all together, that's inside, that's outside. And so we can use things, this is the sort of the interfacing point, because a lot of what I've talked about so far happens inside of Fmod, like all the spatialization, all the reverb sending, that's all inside of Fmod. Here we actually communicate between Fmod and Unreal. Unreal's not just saying, hey, play the sound now. It's actually informing based on things that we set up in the world, how do we want the sound to behave? And so that's another huge part, and that's especially where it gets more complicated once you build complex systems like dynamic music. That's a lot of communication that happens in code, evaluating things that are happening inside of the Unreal world and conveying all that information to Fmod, because Fmod has no idea what the world looks like. It has no idea about the game state. It doesn't know anything. Anything that we want Fmod to know so it can tweak the audio to how we need it to be, we have to tell it. And so this is one of those ways that we can use these volumes to inform it, hey, this gunshot is happening outdoors or indoors, and it can then set this parameter appropriately, and then our behavior that we specified for which of these plays takes over, and that's how we can shape the sound.
And just out of curiosity, for setting those different parameters, are those things that kind of like you have to build it in terms of like all the different subcategories, like outdoors, slightly outdoors, askew, or does the Fmod have any tools that would let you automate that?
There's no automation on that front. It really comes down to how you build it and what you need to build. The system as it exists right now, one might say, is even a little bit reductive because it just says indoor, outdoor. You could have, as you say, so many more individual possibilities for specifying what you really want. And that's something that we're going to endeavor to do. But to talk about sort of the whole setting this up, it really is in the hands of, because you could be doing it with a parameter, you could be doing it some other way, you could make this all happen purely with the reverb that you program, you could be using convolution reverb and route it into those depending on whether the sound is outside or not. There's a multitude of ways that you can do things, and it really comes down to your own sort of decision making and what you actually build into these things. And yeah, these parameters up here, these are not something that Fmod sets up for us. Some of these are, like this distance one right here. This one specifies just how far away the sound is, and you can actually sort of see it. If I move it, you can see it move over here, and if I move it over here, it changes the value. This is a built-in parameter, so if I edit it, it's linked to built-in. And so this is something that Fmod gives us as sort of a gimme. It's like, well, I already know how far the sound away is from the listener and where it's actually playing from, so I can just expose that to you so you can use it to tweak the sound effect. As an example, we might use this. Let's see here. Let's go to world destruction, and we got explosion grenade.
Ooh.
We have a grenade sound, and here we have another little case of using this is outside parameter. We have a different thing that plays every single time the grenade explodes. We want there to be debris, and that happens whether we're outside or inside. But depending on if we're indoors or outdoors, I keep switching between inside and outside and indoor and outdoor. Anyone notice that? We play a different sound, and in this case we're not actually, because so far you've been able to see that we have these single instruments where we can see the waveform as it exists, and in the gunshot you were able to see that we actually have what is called a multi-instrument, where we have a selection of different sound events. So we have just variations of essentially the same sound, but each time it's slightly different. It could select one of those from this list. And in here, there's another type of this instrument, as it's called in Fmod. This is a nested event. So if I fold out this little tiny thing on the side here, it actually folds out into indoor and outdoor. So these are internal things, internal events that have been authored that we're wrapping up and then using specifically here, because we don't want to put all of this logic into here, because that would just clutter things. It becomes a lot easier to build a unique encapsulated event that does all this logic and then place it inside the logic of another event to make things happen. And in this case, we're doing that to switch between indoor and outdoor sounds. And outdoor uses this distance parameter that I just talked about. So far you can see, if we look at this tab right here, it says timeline, and we have the time code sort of at the top here. That's because this is literally just how the sound goes through time. The marker moves along with the seconds that pass. And if I move this around, now obviously that's really stupid and you'd never want to do that, but it just sort of demonstrates that this is a view that's based on time. Over here in the grenade, it says distance. So what we're seeing here is not actually based on time. If I hit play, nothing really moves except the little lines inside the sounds themselves. That's because we're looking at a view of mapping all of these individual sounds to the distance. So as we increase our distance and this parameter changes its value, we actually play different sounds depending on how we've laid them out in this view. So at the start here, we just hear these two. And if we go further, we hear this one and this one sort of fading out. And then as we go even further all the way back here, we just hear this one. And so that's how you can use parameters in a way to also shape the sound in this way by mapping certain assets to particular areas on this scale. And yeah, like I said, this distance parameter is something that Fmod just sort of does by ourselves. We don't have to set this ourselves. But if we go back to the gun, I guess, or actually, let's look at footsteps for a second. Let's see, those would be in characters, and then we have human, Foley, footsteps. Let's look at concrete. This one sort of does a similar thing here. This has a speed parameter, so depending on how fast we move, it changes the sound. And in this one, this is new for 0.15. We have an is first person parameter. And this one is controlled from not from Fmod, but from the game itself. And we can use this to determine whether a sound that is playing on us, the player that's currently playing the game, or on a different character that also exists in the game world, like one of your companions or an enemy. And we can use this to change the behavior of how we want this thing to work in the mix. So if we're just leaving it as it is now, where it's false, we're not first person, I can sort of move this around. Let me move this a bit up. And it spatializes all around us. But if it's happening on the player, I set this to true. No matter where I position the thing, it always plays in your ears, which is really what you want. Because it makes sense to spawn footsteps essentially in the location where you hit the ground, but it would be sort of strange if you started running and you would hear the sound effect sort of move off to your left, even though it's your own clothing moving. So that's what this parameter allows us to do, not just change which sound is played, but now affect these things down here that specify how do we actually mix this sound and how do we treat it as we go through into the mixing structure. So if you see here, right down here where it says pan override, normally it's set to 0, but if we set it is first person to true, it overrides it completely. So now instead of happening sort of spatialized, it happens all, in your spot. And that's something that is also being applied to weapons and a bunch of other things now. And yeah, that's just where your own creativity takes over, and you just sort of have to come up with these solutions yourself, where it's like, okay, we can build a parameter that does this, and then we just have to make sure that this is all happening in code. And so in the whole code base, this is not the exact code where any of this happens, but all of this stuff, somewhere we have to set this parameter, and that's another big thing about technical sound design.
Well, thank you. I love it when I get you to go into like TED Talk lecture mode. that is always like, and you're just like, oh, this is how you do this. This is the outdoor sounds, and then you just like, ooh, thank you for inviting us to your masterclass. So, a few questions. Art from YouTube. Art etc. asks, how many campaigns do you plan on having on release? I think that there's a plan for at least like 3 acts. Don't quote me on that because there could be more. Just it is always in flux, but I think that's what they're sort of shooting for. But always, give that question to Trey, Albarni, or Bowman the next time we have one of them here. They can confirm or deny. I am but merely the social gesture. So, I must make sure that the O5 Council does not dispose any information that is not to the discretion. And then we also have this Russian gentleman asking, can you also add a sniper weapon from the Labev Arms Company? And another question, do you have any sponsorship support or do you use your personal budget? That would be a question to like one of the weapon modelers. There's a ton of guns in this game, so I'm surprised you're asking for more guns. Like for the scale of game to the scale of guns we offer is absolutely absurd. So I'm surprised that there's still more guns you want. But you definitely bring it up to them. And as of right now, we are funded by you, our wonderful benefactors who buy the game on Steam and play it. So thank you so much. We are independent because of that. More guns always. Never enough guns. Not enough until you have a flamethrower and a minigun. All the guns. But yeah, we are funded by you. We are eternally grateful. But that is why we are also very eager to make sure that these updates go above and beyond your expectations, because as of right now, we are funded, and thank you for buying the game and making your friends buy the game. We love your support. But yes, we are independently funded, which is a great thing to be in this age when the game industry is going through a very chaotic period of turmoil where so many people are losing their jobs. Thankfully, we have enough support to keep ourselves going on. But if you want to support the studio and keep us independent, always check out the Affray merch store. Every YouTube video has a link to the Affray merch store in our collaboration with Roba. Check out the merch there. You can get yourself a sweatshirt, t-shirt, stickers, all kinds of neat stuff. We are planning on launching more merch. And of course, if you want to give a super chat, that is always fantastic. It goes into the Affray coffers to make sure that people like Corvis and Piper and all the great professionals at Affray are compensated to do their work. So that never hurts. But thankfully, we are independent and self-funded through your wonderful, generous support. And we hope to be that for the foreseeable future. But that is how we are going. And Ark got the Omni edition. Thank you so much for getting that edition, and hopefully you will enjoy this upcoming update. Although yet again, I will ask: does anyone have any sound related questions? Because I do want Corvus to shine with things that they are suitable and experts in their field, since they are giving us a wonderful TED Talk of Fmod and how these integral sound things that we take for granted as gamers, we are just so spoiled where we have these reactive soundtracks that we just think should happen. But in the end, it takes a person like Corvus, who is doing all the work to have all the ambient music and sound effects and diegetic sound to make that immersive experience. So one thing I'm kind of curious, are they, like, I've listened to a lot of really cool Affray soundtracks. Is there plans to like have that music kind of like appear kind of like how Half-Life does, where you'll every now and then you'll get like a Half-Life track kick in during a pivotal moment, versus the rest of the game where it just has kind of diegetic sound?
Oh, you know it. It's that's a big thing that's going to be happening. Slowly, like I said earlier, we're going to be going through the game sort of section by section and getting it all up to a better standard. And but for this update, 0.15, we've got some hopefully cool stuff coming around that's sort of dipping our toes into the world of not just having a cool track play, but also have it be responsive to the player if all goes well. So I don't know if I can share too much on that. I might be able to show one of the things that is going to be happening in the interrogation area. The big thing that I'm thinking of, I don't think I can share right now. I don't think it's in a position to be shared either. But definitely, it's that's a huge thing that is on our plate, redefining how music is used throughout the game, and like I said, not just making sure that's just a track that plays, because you can do that very easily. What the difficult part is making it responsive to the player when it needs to be, and so this update should hopefully give sort of a sneak peek at what might be possible in that sense.
From our Russian gentleman has another sound related question. How is the sound of bullets flying past you made? And actually, here's a really good question. How do you program that in Fmod to have it where, when you're being shot at by security guards, the bullet whizzes past you?
Okay, so I can't go too much into how the actual sounds themselves are made because I didn't make them. That'd be a better question for some of the other folks on the audio team. As for how they appear in the game has a very complicated system. This is also where it just goes to show how the sound design links into the actual programming of everything. The ballistics of every bullet have tremendous calculations that I cannot take any credit for. They've been here for a long time, and Al Barney and the folks of the programming team have been doing amazing work to make all of that be the way it is now. But we can basically, using these calculations, trace the path of every bullet from the muzzle of the gun to where it ends up, whether that's a direct path or whether that's bouncing off a surface and impacting with a creature or something like that. We can understand what path the bullet takes. And we can use that information to play bullet cracks at appropriate locations near players. And that is, in essence, in the shortest possible terms, that's how it happens. We basically, we could do something super simple where it's just like, oh, when there's a gunshot, just play this sound with a little bit of delay, but that wouldn't be very realistic or very accurate. But this complicated system that exists for creating accurate ballistics for the bullets, so we can have accurate gunplay, allows us as sound designers to also hook into that and make sound happen in a very accurate way to how the ballistics are actually happening around you.
So it's multiple people working in many different disciplines to get that whooshing sound effect that
Absolutely.
uh, gives you that sense of fear and is ever so important for a tactical horror game. Just out of curiosity, what would you say is would be on your Mount Rushmore of like best sound design for games recently? If you had to pick like the ones that you are your guiding posts for the work you do.
For the work that I do, that's really difficult because I can't speak for the team. There's a lot of influences, obviously, all over the team. It's even it's also it's really difficult to speak for it by myself as well because it's not necessarily. There's a lot of games that I've played recently that have had superb sound design that I'm not necessarily letting flow into this game particularly, but just sort of in the work that I do. So if I guess that's what you're going after, I guess let's see if I can drop a few. Um, I really enjoyed, and this is a bit of a non sequitur because it's a completely different game to what this is. The Stanley Parable had Ultra Deluxe. The Ultra Deluxe version that came out recently had some absolutely superb sound design in it, especially when it comes to ambiances, as well as the use of music. But definitely the ambiances because it is such a quirky little game that's really cutesy in a way, but through use of very pinpoint sounds in very certain situations, it can actually kind of unsettle you. Uh, and I think that's just extremely effective, and I'm just so amazed at how they were able to do that. Um, Another one that I like for its simplicity. A lot of things that I guess I really appreciate about games is when they have very good ambience, because that's something that sort of guides you through the entire game, is the ambient sounds of the world around you. The game Infra has an amazing soundscape. It's not the most technically competent in terms of sound spatialization, I will say, I guess. But that's like the only critique that I can think of. It just shapes sound in such a beautiful way, and it kind of shows through very classic techniques what you can do with sound design. Because it's not just we make the sound of the world exactly as it is, as we perceive it, but we also have sound design as a tool to add additional layers to the soundscape that we're perceiving that can make us feel certain emotions that may not be present from the visuals alone. And that's something I think that was really well done in that game. It's a 2016 game. A lot of people have not heard of it, and people should be hearing about it because it is superb. I'm trying to think of some other major ones. Obviously, Left 4 Dead already came up, so I don't want to repeat that, but I will just say it again. Left 4 Dead.
Left 4 Dead is always good.
A lot
Anything
of
anything Valve does is always great from a sound design perspective.
It is. Half-Life Alyx is another thing that comes to mind, not just for sound design, but also for the music and how they use music.
Oh,
The sound design, obviously, with their thing is on a different level because they're using binaural techniques to get a VR sound experience, and it's crazy. If you've not heard the sound of Half-Life Alyx, listen to it. It's so good. Absolutely amazing. Oh, in terms of music, I should say, because obviously a lot of the sort of game is sound, but a lot of it is also music. Some absolutely beautiful music, especially in terms of dynamic music. For me, recently has been the game Abzu, which is also a bit older, but it is a beautiful soundtrack written by Austin Wintory, and it is so moving, but also dynamic with what the player does, which is crazy because it's like a full orchestral sort of soundtrack. And you would think that that is extremely difficult to get to be dynamic and sync up to your actions, and it is. And that's why it's just so much more impressive that they were able to pull it off in the way that they did. So yeah, those are some of the things that have influenced me recently that I just think back to, and it's like, oh man, that's the sort of thing that's like really great. You can find great stuff in a lot of places, including indie games,
uh,
especially indie games. There's so much that indie games do that is really innovative with sound. So
they do definitely seem to be more experimental. What was that game that everyone seemed to love from that YouTuber that also people love? Video game Donkey Animal Well. Just from the trailers, that seemed that had like a really unique soundtrack.
I haven't heard of it.
Oh,
I'll have to look into that.
yeah, I think you'd probably really get a kick out of it.
Link
It's
it
like
to me.
I'll send it to you. I'll send you a link after we're done with the whatchamacallit, the session. Yeah, you'd probably really like Animal Well from what I've seen of it. Zin through the circle says, I have one question I have for Corvus or any of the team. Have you ever found a glitch in the sound, like all the sounds play at the same time, or too loud, or one that was really difficult to fix?
Oh, uh, yeah. Things happen all the time, and they happen to goofs that's like, oh, this just doesn't play sound at all. And sometimes you notice those things either by playing, because you notice, oh, this thing just doesn't have a sound when I interact with it. And other things you just sort of find flying around the level that you didn't even know were there unless you go and investigated them. Like one of the very first things that I noticed is that in the opening area of the game, there's like a trigger that plays some sort of sound effect somewhere that just didn't work, and so it never happened. And so goofs like that happen. Fortunately, glitches where everything kind of bugs out is we have measures that protect against that. Because we can use a bunch of techniques on Unreal's side to limit how much we actually trigger a sound, and then also inside of Fmod, we can limit how many instances of a sound are allowed to play at the same time, and we can use all of those to not just protect from the game going crazy and spamming audio in your ears, but also to make everything a bit more performant. Because obviously, if we have a lot of sound effects going on at the same time, with a lot of effects going on with them, the CPU usage is going to go up, and we really want to use CPU usage not necessarily for audio, but rather for other more gameplay critical things. And so we can use a lot of techniques like limiting instances and virtualizing them to limit just how much processing we actually do. One of the things that came up for me is that uh, uh, it's it's difficult because a lot of it has to do. Um, it's a funny thing because we keep talking about it sort of in the sound team of like, It would be really easy for us to just make something happen um, that shouldn't, because all it could take inside of fmod is us adding a little looping section to a sound, and then now that sound just loops infinitely in that one spot, and depending on how it's placed, that might cause some problems, and we have some issues. A thing that came up, for example, during development of this update is that we implemented a new event for something that's going to play during gameplay that I don't even know if I can get into. But what happened is that it would start playing, and it's got like a radio static on it or something, and it would just never stop because the way it was set up just was not meant for it to stop by itself. And so it would just loop and loop, and then if another one played, it would loop on top of that, and it would have that build up, and it keeps going and keeps going. And fortunately, you catch those things relatively quickly, and you can go in and you can adjust the logic of the events and fix it before it gets to an actual problem point. But you just always got to keep on your toes and make sure you're dotting your i's and crossing your t's. Um, and sometimes you do make a misstep, and something just completely breaks. But fortunately, we have ways, not just inside of fmod, but also in the way that our company is structured and how we use things like source control, that we can, if something messes up pretty majorly, we can pinpoint it where it went wrong and revert it and get everything nice and cleaned up again. So, um, yeah.
Well,
It's telling me on Discord that my stream is paused and I have to switch to my application to resume. I don't know if you're getting that.
yeah, I do see that a little bit. I don't know if it's like just like your application got timed out. But you
I
can.
think it's because I'm loading into the main map of the game, and that's probably
Ah.
using some system resources. So I'm
Well,
hoping here that it comes back relatively soon.
that's fine as long as we have something on screen. It's not the end of the world. Well, I was kind of curious
All right.
though. On average, like, how much processing go to sound? Is it like 10%, 5%? What's the sort of ideal ratio that you sound people sort of shoot for? Hello.
Uh, Hello.
Uh,
We don't currently in the company have a particular standard for it yet. Different game companies have different standards for it, and also it really depends on what you're delivering for. A PC, you can usually be a bit more liberal because PCs have a lot of computing power, especially nowadays with people cranking the crazy things out of their CPUs. So in those cases, you're sometimes less concerned, and typically, if you're setting up the audio correctly anyway, you don't get into a situation where things go crazy on the processing power. Once you look at things like consoles or things like mobile deployment, that's when you really got to start looking at it very, very, very closely, because you have very strict sort of memory limitations as well as processing limitations. There are some, if you look at some like GDC talks, for example, sometimes audio people will talk about the budget that they were given. As far as I can tell, we don't have a particular budget, as far as not one that comes to mind right now. Obviously, keep it as low as possible, but so don't go crazy spamming raycasts. But you might find more specific numbers in other settings, like Hitman, for example. I think the first Hitman had something like a certain amount of milliseconds on the main thread, and that's the sort of realm that these things, the audio people deal with. Not necessarily sound designers, because sound designers are chiefly concerned with just making the sound happen and creating the assets, but then technical sound designers and audio programmers, which is also a separate sort of field of work, they would have a lot of sort of, they have to exercise a lot of scrutiny on making sure that the things that they program in do not exceed a certain budget per frame on the main thread. And that's a whole sort of microscopic world, because a few milliseconds is not a lot in real time, but in terms of frame time and having processing available to render the game and make all of that happen, it's a lot.
It's interesting because like that's a consideration you never think about. Like how much the CPU processing power do you want? Like I guess if you wanted to just like have completely brick someone's computer, would it just be like hundreds of gun sound effects or like several looping tracks? Like what would be the most demanding thing you could do from a sound design perspective?
Oh, I don't think 100 gunshots would brick someone's computer. In most cases, the audio won't actually brick someone's computer. It would be more if something's happening on the programmatic side, inside of Unreal, which I just saw crashed. So that's fun. I'll have to get that back up and loading in the background. Because the audio thread itself is typically limited to a certain amount of samples, which is a tiny unit of that is used in the realm of audio. And it basically specifies that there's a certain limit to how much processing can actually happen on purely the audio processing side of things. And once we reach that limit, we get to start we start getting into things that are not fun, not pleasant. We wouldn't be bricking anyone's computer necessarily, but we're gonna get some unpleasant sounds in your ears, like clicking and things cutting out, and just really, not fun stuff like that. That's what we get into when we spam sound instances and just go crazy on the effects. So rest assured, things like that are probably not gonna brick your computer. But they're going to be unpleasant if it ever happens during gameplay. So that's what we're careful to avoid, and that's why we use the tools that we have inside of Fmod to prevent that sort of situation from happening. And we do have our very own profiling tools inside of Fmod that can actually allow us to take a very close look at just how much CPU any event is using. And I was actually going to demonstrate that right now, except that,
Ooh.
of course, my Unreal crashed, and so it'll take a minute for me to roll that back up. But that could, I guess, be the next practical demonstration.
Oh yeah, I definitely want to see that. Well, while you're trying to get your Unreal up and running, the Russian gentleman had a few questions. The questions may be off topic for the presentation. Will new machine guns be added to the game, and will they be Russian made? There are 2 new weapons coming in the update. Update 15. I cannot say if they're Russian because I am not a super gun expert, but there are 2 new weapons. And aren't there a lot of Russian weapons so far? I thought that there was like a bunch of AKs. But look up for the 2 new weapons. One of them might be Russian, so you will find out in time. And I was wondering if another question from the Russian gentleman. I was wondering if bleeding or broken limbs or devices for treating these ailments will be added to the game. That would be a better question for Trey. As far as I know, I don't think so. I feel like, who knows? You never know. Maybe in DLC in the future, there'll be like an ultra realism mode where you have to go all Snake Eater and like extract the bullets and tend to your wounds. That could be a possibility. But as far as I know, that is not what is going to be happening right now. And Arc, etc. says you should get a firearms sponsorship for Heckler and Koch. I did not even know that firearms actually sponsor games like SCP-5K. But who knows? That might have something that we should look into because we're always interested on ways that we can keep ourselves self-sustained. Any luck getting Unreal to load up?
Well, I was going to ask if it's okay if you want to riff for like a minute or two. It looks like I'm gonna have to just give my computer a quick kick in the ass and give it a quick restart. So I'll be back in just a second if that's all right.
Yeah, that's fine. It's only suitable that I should riff. I should give you the chance since I had to restart my computer. So restart your comp. I will riff. I am very good at that. I can definitely give you some time. So, as Corvus is getting their computer
Awesome.
up
Thank
for
you so
their
much. Brief intermission.
a brief intermission, and this is an intermission about what could have been a story behind the scenes of something that I personally tried to make happen, but will not be happening. So I had this. I was talking to an old friend of mine, and he was telling me about how he had was working to try and get a Zamboni game made, or get Zamboni linked with game developers, but those projects fell through. And I was thinking, like, oh man, maybe if I get them connected with a Fray, we can get Zamboni money, and we'll get SCP-5K completely financed to its 100% completion. And all we need to do is add in a Zamboni mini game to 5K, and it'll be fantastic. All you can do is run around in a Zamboni on an ice skating rink, and then maybe you fight SCPs in the Zamboni. Because, like, think about it, SCP-5K, the SCP Organization Foundation, they're probably $1 billion trillion industry, funded by shadow money. They've got like the best of the best employees. They got to have a lot of perks to get that kind of talent and keep that kind of talent. So they probably have like indoor water parks. They probably have ice skating rinks, leisurely things like the semi-evil, semi-unethical foundation. They got to give you good reasons to do that. They got to give you good reasons to keep on being a part of it. So I think like a Zamboni minigame, at first it doesn't make sense, but I think there are ways you can make it sense. Like, imagine you're going to Antarctica, then you go to an ice skating rink, and then you find the ice skating rink, and then there's a Zamboni you can ride, and then you'd start the Zamboni minigame. And how funny would that be if you just open up the new update, and then there is a gigantic Zamboni game that is you can play, and you can run down the zombies, you can run down SCPs while you are doing Zamboni ice skating rink. Now imagine this fantasy that this actually happens. Fray gets like $1 million to make this Zamboni game. Wouldn't that be hilarious? But sadly, this did not happen because there was a crucial piece of information that I was missing. The piece of information I was missing is that the Zamboni company didn't want to just fund someone to make a Zamboni and get it into gaming. They wanted a license. So a license would be basically someone would pay them 13% of whatever the game is, plus a licensing fee, to use the Zamboni name and create a Zamboni game. Just kind of like how, EA licensed the NFL to make, Madden. EA doesn't own football. Madden is a license from the NFL. So obviously, then it becomes a fun way to get it to work, to an absolutely horrible idea, to basically sacrifice the game to have this stupid mini game, and it's a stupid, terrible idea, and it's not going to happen, which is the only reason I can tell you about it. So that was something I thought I could make happen, but I did not have all the information. So there you go, the secret story of the Zamboni. I like to think that maybe, if the multiverse is real and we are on multiple timelines on different places, that there is a version where this happened, and right now you're playing the SCP-5K with the Zamboni minigame, and then the Zamboni minigame becomes kind of like the goat simulator that's so super popular that people just love it and become all the streamers start playing it. But that is not happening. There is no chance in heck that we are going to spend a lot of money to get the rights to put Zambonis in the video game. So I hope that little story is something that you found funny and interesting. You want me to 1v1 you in chess, Bobcat Power? Well, you know what? I don't play chess. I play checkers. Oh, and I'm gonna double dog dare you.
Oh, that's a weird brag.
I know. It was kind of it's supposed to be a reverse, because everyone's playing checkers. Well, I'm playing chess. I think everyone's favorite controversial streamer, whatchamacallit, Dr. Disrespect put it out, a tweet where he's like, you're playing checkers, I'm playing chess. It's like, I do not know what inspired you to do that, but that's not how I would go about the allegations. But you do you. But our Russian gentleman asks, what kind of tea do you like to drink? And I don't like tea mostly. I'm not a big tea guy. Did the restart help your computer?
It did. Unreal seems to be actually loading, so that's great.
Fantastic. Isn't it so fantastic that we just have these machines that, do everything they're supposed to do? But then as the years go on, they start doing less and less. So then you have to do like little bits of voodoo magic to get them to work.
I just want it to work, please.
Fingers crossed. Yeah, we'll try.
I'll keep an eye on it.
We'll try and keep the the doctor out of this. But I thought that was a good, you play checkers, I play chess analogy. Who knows? Maybe there is. Oh, here's a good question. Corvus, what movie do you think Social should play during the movie night?
Oh, what movie? Is it like any movie at all, or is it? Do you look for specific genres?
Well, because try to keep it SCP related. So, like, I try and do things in the sci-fi and horror, fantasy, those kind of realms. But so I guess in that regard, what would you suggest as a movie to be played for the movie night?
That's really tough because I don't actually watch too many horror movies myself. Sci-fi, I mean, I immediately think, in terms of music, I think of Alien and Aliens. Just amazing scores and amazing movies from an amazing franchise.
Well, just out of are you excited for Alien Romulus?
Modern, yeah. That's the first time I've heard of it.
What? You didn't know that there's a new Alien movie coming out next week?
I don't keep track of the new things. I didn't know. That's crazy. Yeah, no, I'm really bad at keeping track of new releases.
Well, anyway, not to get you distracted, but those are great choices, and they will definitely appear. The Aliens are fantastic. Any other movies?
I mean, I don't know if this is really related, but I think everyone should see Oppenheimer. If you haven't seen Oppenheimer during the Barbenheimer thing, you go watch Oppenheimer and then watch Barbie. Actually watch both, yeah. Although Barbie is not really quite fitting for this particular context.
Well, you could make the argue that, like, given its multi-dimensional crossings, that, Barbie does have kind of like a SCP kind of context.
Fair enough.
Yeah,
I see.
I don't think I think you could probably write a really good SCP article about Barbie and just like the weird rules it has in terms of like how you cross over to the toy universe to the real universe. And The Thing, the best anomaly movie ever. Well, we have done The Thing. The Thing has made an appearance, and yes, it is a beloved favorite. But the Alien movies are great. Are a great suggestion. I absolutely do love those. And I'm keeping my fingers crossed that Alien Romulus is a good movie. The barrier it has to cross is really low. It just has to be competent and well. Oh yeah! Oh my God! What is this we are looking at here?
What is playing? Oh, that's my own music. Okay, let me stop that. So what we're looking at here is sort of just an overview of the interrogation area. If we go into lit, we can actually go in and we actually see, yep, this is where we are, but this is what it looks like from a developer standpoint. Lots of boxes everywhere, but this is an area that's sort of been subject to our revampifications. So a lot has happened in terms of the sound here. So what I'm going to try to do is hope and pray that this works. If I go to standalone game, it should hopefully start up. I should sort of demonstrate in there. Let's see if the audio comes through, because that might be a bit messy.
I do love.
It seems to be going through.
I do love seeing the developer view of the area. I always think that is fantastic to watch.
That's an intro sequence. And now it's going to stay black for a little bit because it's loading. But basically, what I'm intending to show, I guess this is a bit of a sneak peek at some of the new sound stuff that we have in this update. And then in that vein, I'm going to see if I can demonstrate some of the profiling tools that we have at our disposal. But yeah, it's going to be a black screen for just a little bit, and then it's going to load in, and
Ooh.
it's all going to work.
Oh, so
I might fall through the map, but
here we go. Exclusive. Those who have been waiting around are about to be rewarded. Your audio sensories will be rewarded with new sounds that have not appeared or been heard. Get ready to have your ears blasted with the latest sound effects and greatest innovations that have been deployed by the wonderful employees at Affray in stereoscopic 3D.
You're hyping this up to a point that I feel like I have to barge in here for a second and say this is not the 80s. This is not the best thing that ever happened in the history of the world.
Yeah.
Commercials and just this is a new stereoscopic vision. There's stereophonic audio. It plays the music.
I'm so glad that you're old enough to recognize what I'm like trying to emulate and reference.
One of my favorite pieces of music is a remix of like an old ad for something called the MCA Disco Vision. And it's just this synth track with a voice underneath it going, "Welcome to the world of MCA Disco Vision. Before using your player," and then, but yes, hopefully everyone can hear this. I'm in.
I can hear it.
A place for sure. And so.
Ooh, this
turn on God mode because I'm silly.
This looks definitely revamped from. Am I crazy? This red light blinking, that's new, right?
It could very well be. Let's step outside. So you can hear that some stuff has happened in the soundscape. Oh, I was wondering why the reverb is so high. It's because I earlier demonstrated it by turning it all the way up. So let me actually just fix that. There we go. That's a lot better. So this is what we're hearing now. Some ambient sounds going on. The whole ambience was completely reworked by our sound designer, Cools.
Ooh. So now it's a little.
Different areas have slightly different soundscapes now.
So it's a little less
enter here.
Generic office, and you can kind of hear a little bit of piping sound effects.
Exactly right. And now I'm actually connected to the game right now using Live Update and Fmod, so I can actually monitor exactly what's going on. Inside the game right now, and I can see all the levels.
Oh my God! So is this
and
like?
So
is this like these are like all the sounds that are going on in the game right now, right? These are like all the. Am I reading that right?
That's exactly right. Yep.
Oh,
You can actually look at them live while we're playing and actually tweak them. So if I want, I can actually go in and I can turn the ambient bed off and turn it back on real loud or something. I can go into the event itself and modify things, and I can actually hear it right in the game. But so what we can do is, if we want to listen to some of the, let's say we just want to listen to the new ambience, we can go to the mixer bus, SFX World Ambience, and that should be selected somewhere. I don't even know where. There it is, and I can just solo that. And so now all I'm hearing is the ambience. I'm not hearing my footsteps anymore. This is just purely the ambience that we have going on. If I turn that up a bit.
Very cool. Very cool.
Hopefully we're going to hear another little middle crash, maybe. It is random, so I don't know when anything's going to happen. Yep, there's one. So we can use that to monitor the ambience. If we want, we can take the ambience completely out. And this actually reveals... It's still reverbing in the distance there. This actually reveals another thing that's new in this area. We've got unique music in here now.
Oh,
so sort of ambient, just in the background.
It's very subtle. It's not overpowering. Oh wow! It's very very tasteful.
If I open the event up for the music specifically, actually, so this is what it looks like, because now we're looking at events that are specific to this interrogation room location, so they're not in global anymore, they're actually in Area 12, Chapter 1, and then intro cells, because that's the name of the map. And then in here we have the events that are actually used. And so right now we're listening to the music, which consists of 2 layers, one of which is just the droning sort of loop itself. And then underneath that, we have a scatter instrument, which plays snippets from this. Randomly, it picks a point in this sound file to play from, and then it plays about a 6-second snippet. And it does that every 5 to 10 seconds. You can sort of hear that. I can even go further and solo just this layer, turn it up. So now you're just getting these extra layers that are just there sometimes just to give some evoking imagery. Just walking, and sometimes you'll get over the ambience.
Oh wow! It's got a very,
and that's
it's very subtle. It kind of gives me an Event Horizon vibe.
Yeah, so those are some of the tools that we do. This is like not necessarily dynamic music, but this is definitely using music in a more dynamic way, because now we're not just playing a track that loops, we're actually having it sort of happen in real time, and each time it's going to sound different. It's going to sound different for every single player, essentially, because it's purely random. So those are some of the nice things. And then, oh, there's a little stinger that I like. I'm muting that again. Let's see. There's another tool that we can use besides this mixer, where we can see everything in terms of levels. We can also go in and use the profiler and record. And now you can see on the right here, we have an overview of exactly where every single sound is in the world right now. So if I start moving around, if I can move this in a way that is both are visible, you can see that map move, and you can see new blobs pop up where I step. It's like a moving map of every single sound effect that's in the game right now. And we can look in this list at exactly how much CPU we're using, how much memory we're using, and then look at all of the individual events themselves. So if we want to listen to not just a group of things like the ambience, we want to just listen to anything that's this light hum, we can solo this, and now we're just listening to the light that's probably coming from in here. Yep.
Oh, so there is
And so these are the sort of things that we can use to get really into the detail of everything and really fine-tune things.
And I imagine it's quite the process of like going through every single area of the map and making sure that it has an appropriate soundscape. That's kind of like what makes your job very technical and very time consuming and tedious.
Yeah, it is a huge monumentous task. Like going through this area even took a few weeks, and it might even be polished a little more before it actually goes into release. Um, but that's the sort of thing that we have to do and we want to do, and we're going to do it for every single area in the game, and hopefully make it all very exciting. But yeah, so that's sort of an overview, I guess. I wish I had something specific to demonstrate. Maybe I do, maybe I don't. But that's the sort of thing that we can use as well to make sure that everything is working right. Because while I was developing this, at some point there was actually a problem where it was not playing some of the room tones quite correctly. Because if you notice, let's go into the mixer again, just listen to the ambience. Here we go. The sound actually changes now between when you're in this hallway and when you're in here. Like there's a bit of a ventilation noise, and some of the background sound effects kind of go away into the background a bit. And that's something that is also pretty new, because everything before was just one big soundscape for everything, and then some of the offices had their own sort of soundscapes, but they all had like little bits of musical ambience in them, and it just wasn't very clean, and that's all been cleaned up now, and everything has a unique sound. And like I said, we're going to do that for every single area in the game, which is huge. I mean, the game is massive, so it'll take a while for sure, but I guess that means you also get to look forward to some more updates happening to the sound in every single iteration of the game going forward.
Yeah, so you can look forward to each area. So I guess out of all the areas that exist currently, so it sounds like Act One has gotten your treatment, or at least maybe half of it. And then I guess how far are you in the Chapter 2 and 3 in Antarctica?
Right now, we're actually still starting out on Act One. A lot of things that have been taking up some time is making sure that we can even do a lot of this, because all of this depends on having a very clean structure inside of the Fmod project and inside of the mixing bus structure, and that didn't quite exist before, so a lot of time went into setting this up so that we can start doing this. And so point 15 in that regard is sort of a trial run almost. Like I said, we got this, we've done this for the interrogation area, and so the new area is coming up. But we're gonna keep going through area 12, Act 1, Chapter 1, I should say, through and through with each update. Gonna do more with probably even on point 1, point 2 updates, probably gonna contain updates for that as well. We do have plans to touch every single area, including Antarctica and all the other chapters. But we're gonna take it one at a time. For the moment, we don't want to scattergun too much and just gotta get lost in the sauce of just doing it everywhere, and then we just sort of forget what we were really doing. We're gonna take a more linear approach to make sure that we keep the quality consistent. So I can't give exact times when we're gonna start doing some of the other things, but rest assured they will happen.
Does the doing the Antarctica area make you nervous? Considering, I imagine the sandscape in Antarctica is much more complex than like a destroyed office space.
It doesn't make me nervous. If anything, it makes me very excited, because Antarctica is such a unique space, and right now the audio is relatively basic, and there's so much more that we can do, and that it's already in the works behind the scenes. So really, it's a daunting task, but I'm in no way frightened by it. I'm really excited to get around to it, actually, because there's so much untapped opportunity that we're going to take advantage of, and I think everyone on the sound team is extremely excited as well. So I don't think there's anything to be worried about. We're very excited.
Excited to tackle that mountain. So we have a question from Zinthu the Circle. I always wonder, do the sound travel through walls like a sphere or bounce between the walls and make it more loud? It depends on the direction of the sound.
The way the sound is spatialized is relatively, I mean, under the hood, it's a sort of complex math equation that I can't exactly unravel right now, but you have to imagine a sound as coming from a certain point in space, and the listener or your ears are on another point somewhere in space, and then using a bunch of complicated vector math that fortunately we don't have to do, Fmod does it for us. We can calculate just how loud certain parts of the sound should be in every single speaker, that would accurately model the relationship from point A, the listener, to point B, the source itself. And so at the most basic level, that's what it is. It's just we take all of the channels and we change the volumes around until it matches whatever we calculated for where the sound is and where the listener is. And then we go on top of that to create more interesting effects, because it's fine if it's just sort of panning around in your ears, but for reverb and things like that, now we look at setting up reverb volumes and those ambient volumes that I showed earlier, where if I actually jump out into here, you can see them again, all of these yellow boxes right here. Those are ambient sound volumes. A lot of these are placed in the offices. There's another one placed over here where there's some pipe stuff, and they specify what room tone plays, so what the ambience is that we're getting in our ears, and also what the reverb is. And the reverb itself right now is an algorithmic reverb, which means that it's an effect that we can sort of tweak parameters of, and it takes the audio signal into it and then does some more complicated math and then puts out an audio signal that's got the reverb on it according to the settings that we've set. There's different types of reverb. There's another one that's called convolution reverb, which is a lot more realistic, but also more expensive on the CPU, where you actually sample the reverb of a space in real life and then apply that to the sound. So it's like you're putting the sound into that space. It's really useful, but like I say, a lot more processing power needed. And then nowadays, a lot of games start to experiment with calculated reverb from the actual game geometry, where you basically simulate. It's like ray casting or ray tracing for graphics, but you do that for sound. You spawn a lot of rays going from a sound source, and you make them hit all of the geometry and all of that going to the listener, and then you apply reverb and certain other effects based on how those raycasts went. That's something that's still up and coming, and some prototypes I think are using it to great effect, but it's not something that's like generally applicable as of right now. So we're doing the reverb tweaking sort of ourselves. We specify where do we want reverb, and then we go into Fmod and we set up the properties to where it matches the space that we're in. And sometimes we can do that very generically, where you can say, well, this is a small room, this is an office, this is a tiled corridor, and then we can apply reverb based on that. We only have to make one preset, and every tiled corridor is now going to have that sort of sound. And then other times, as we have in this update, we have some more unique spaces that are going to make us, where we have to make unique reverb settings for that space. But that's also a big part of the creative process, and which, like, that's my now that's that aside. Now, my personal opinion, I like this way of doing it, because sort of calculated reverb from the actual game geometry, I feel is nice and it's cool, but it doesn't have quite as much tweakability. Whereas in this case, where we actually set the parameters for the reverb, we can get very creative and make deliberate decisions about how we want the reverb to sound in a particular situation. So it kind of retains a bit of creative control in that part, but that's just me.
So we also have another question from a Russian gentleman that also kind of like ties into that. How is echo created? So how is echo created in a video game?
Echo, it sort of depends. The most simplistic terms, I guess, if we're going back to Half-Life, which came up earlier, you can actually see this happen in Half-Life a bunch, where what they did is they would take the sound and then they would repeat it a certain time later and a certain volume less, and that's called a delay effect, where you just run the. Actually, I can. Let's see. Let me just go over here and I guess I mute the game audio. Actually, that doesn't work. I have to. I'll go in here. Actually, I can quit out of this for a moment, so that's fine. It should probably stop playing in a second. There we go. Ooh, nice. Crashed. That's fun. Either way, we're back in Fmod.
Hey, you had it running for a while.
Effect that we created earlier. Huh?
Oh, I was just saying, you had it running for a little while, so you got to show us the cool stuff. So I'm happy about that. Is Unreal just like generally difficult to take like a real space hog? That if you don't have like a beast of a PC, it'll just slow down.
Yeah. Yeah. Unreal it wants a lot of CPU, a lot of memory, and also a lot of disk space. Like about I think a terabyte or so is just reserved for, because it's difficult for us as well, because we don't just download Unreal Engine from the actual Epic Store. We have our own custom version of it that has been built by Albarni and the fine folks over there, so we can have our own unique features that we need. But that means that everyone's got to have their own copy that's specifically built every single time on their machine, and yeah, it's a lot of hardware space, but. Anyway, the darts sound effect right here. Let's actually take off the reverb and the spatialization effect for a moment. So we just have that. And old games, what they would do is apply just a delay effect, which just does this. And you would tweak that, and you could make different effects. Like that might be, ooh, okay, well maybe that's how a sound happens in like a tiled corridor, where you have like very fast reflections. Or if you're outdoors, you might have that going on. You can hear that if you play Half-Life, for example. You can even if you play it now, Half-Life Source, or you play it in Gary's mod, you can actually hear that in certain few locations where it just echoes like that because it's just delaying the sound. And back then, that was the closest way to approximate the space. Nowadays, we have more efficient tools like the reverb that we have. So now we have sort of more defined echo from the space around us, and we can tweak it so it's longer depending on what we need. We want it more tiley. And then, like I mentioned a minute ago, the convolution reverb and things like that. And all of those are ways in which we can create different types of echo. Sometimes the delays are still the good stuff. Sometimes if you need an echo, you just put a delay effect on it, and that's good. But things like the guns, for example, let me see if I pull one up again. Firearms. I'll go for the Colt again. We listen to this. If I click the right one. This one you couldn't do with a delay effect, because it's a bunch of complicated sort of slaps that come back from the terrain. And in order to make that happen dynamically for sound in the game, you would probably use a convolution reverb that is capturing the actual echo in a real life location and then just applying that to any sound that you actually play back in the game. So there's a bunch of different ways to do it. Like I say, we do it with just a calculated reverb effect, and then if we need special things like for the guns, where we really want to have that sort of echoey sound, we can have our own assets that were recorded live on site and put those in the game.
And that is how you do echoes. Very interesting. Sort of well, what's so fascinating is that like all the things that I guess happen naturally in space, you have to have a way to like recreate digitally, which is what makes the world of sound design so fascinating.
Yeah, and that's again, that's a huge thing, because a lot of this stuff you can do on the asset creation side, and then a lot of this stuff you can do on the technical side live. So the whole reason that we can have the reverb system that we want, and we're going to improve it, obviously. But the whole reason that we can do that is because we have these tools available to us to get creative and build these things so they play back live on the actual device depending on the parameters of the game. And so it's just fun, and it's great playing off with the sound team, the sound design team specifically, on that as well. Because sometimes you might have a situation where you're playing around with something in here, and you need to tweak it in here, and it doesn't quite work, and so you go back to the sound team, and they can tweak it on their end and make it more so it works for you on the technical side. Like today, one of our sound designers gave me a bunch of files for a door, a new door sound that's going to be going in. And I was like, okay, this is great, but it would be awesome if we could spatialize individual parts of that to certain parts of the door. And so he actually went back and separated those layers out for me so that I can build it in a way that is more accurate to the actual object as it moves in the game. Can we listen to the door sounds? Unfortunately not. Sorry. You will listen to them in 0.15.
Uh, is there, just out of curiosity, is there any technical reason why we can't listen to the door sounds, or are they like classified?
It's a mixture of classified and they're still work in progress, and I don't want to be dragging work in progress things necessarily through
Dang.
this.
I did not think that like the door sounds would be like so critical. All right, I cannot wait to hear those door sounds. We have been running for 2.5 hours. I just want to check in on how you're feeling, because I know it's like 10.
Great.
All right, 10:30.
Yeah, 10:30.
All right, so do let us know if it gets too late for you, if you have anything that makes you want to wrap up. Let's go for another half an hour and see how you're doing.
All right.
But no, I'm glad to hear you. Everyone's always nervous when I bring them in here, and then when they're like, "Oh, I get to showcase with people who are interested in all the stuff I do," that is fantastic. So, just out of curiosity, one of the most interesting additions in the most recent patch was the door squid. Just out of curiosity, how do you handle the doing the dynamic sound design for this like spontaneous creature that can come out of a door and then just eat you?
A lot of that is determining sort of what you want to have happen, like linking what happens in gameplay with what you want to have happen in sound, which is a bit vague. So I'll clarify, I guess. I've been referring to all of these sounds in the whole stream as events, and the reason that they're called events is because they're technically supposed to model an event happens in the game, it produces a sound. So it's not necessarily that we're just using a fancy name for the sounds happening. I guess to a certain degree we are, but the idea behind it is that when something happens in the game, that constitutes an event that happens, and you want to have a sound associated with that. And so in terms of like a creature, for example, you would be thinking about, okay, what sort of stages of activity does this creature have? What does it do? How does it do it? And how do we want to link that to the audio? And sometimes there's multiple ways to do that. I guess starting off, we would be like, okay, we want an attack sound, we want sort of an idle sound, we want maybe a vocalization, and we would be able to take that and sort of say, okay, those are events that are going to happen in the game that need to have sounds. So we make events for those, and they might just be blank for a bit. We can just have them in our brains. It's just like, okay, cool, that's where sounds are going to go. And then we could hook them up in the game itself in a variety of different ways. They can be part of the actual character code. So if the character decides to do something, or the code of the character decides to do something, and it has a direct reference to a sound event that it's supposed to play, and so it plays that. So for example, an attack, or something like that. Um, and then other things might be tied to animation. So, for example, this is not a creature, but gun handling. When you reload your weapon and things like that, the sounds that happen there are not one big thing. They're actually individual pieces that are triggered alongside the animation. So when the animation, the hammer is pulled back or whatever, we start the sound effect to have that happen. And so there's a bunch of different ways in which you can like that, and you can use both in combination even, where certain sounds happen programmatically from code, and others happen from animation on the same creature or the same item even. It all depends on what works best for the particular situation. But so, like I say, if we have a new creature coming in, I don't know, we introduce an ASCP just off the bat right now, we would look at, okay, what individual things does this SCP or this creature do that we need to have sound, then determine where do we hook into that. Do we do that in animation, or do we do that in the code? Parallel to that, assets are being created, and then it all comes together where we make the individual events inside of Fmod, and then hook them up in the engine itself. So for the characters, for example, the Chicken Man, for example, we have a bunch of different ones right here. We have vocal effects, we have movement effects, we have melee effects, we have damage. And so vocals are all of these different, just vocalizations that the SCP makes. And for movement, we've got just the footsteps itself, charging. Here's actually an interesting case because I kept talking about all of the different types of instruments that Fmod has. Here's another interesting one. This is a programmer event, command instrument. So these sounds are up here, these sounds are part of this event itself, and then down here it tells a different event that exists somewhere else to play. So in this way we can say, okay, when 3199 charges and crashes into something, it makes these thudding noises, and then it also makes sure to play this vocal event down here. And so there's a lot of flexibility that we can use inside of events like that, where rather than saying, okay, it has to make a vocal noise, we have to program that in now, or we have to hook that up in the animation, we can actually have that happen from inside Fmod itself, where we know, okay, whenever it crashes into something, it's going to play this, and then it's supposed to scream. We can just hook that up right then and there. Hope that answers the question.
I think that was a very thorough answer. I love it when I get little TED Talks and ask a question and lead to little mini TED Talks. So here's another really interesting question from Duncan RDF. In the SCP universe, there are MTF units just for audio SCPs. Is there any strange, wacky anomaly you'd like to add that messes with the environment sound settings?
Ooh. I can't talk for what plans there are because I don't know if that's something that's planned or not. I have no idea. If you're asking me personally, that would be really, really fun. Because just thinking about it, because you can go, depending on what it is, you can do a variety of different things of having sounds appear in certain places, or just sounds completely changing their character. I would love that. Like if that ever happens to come up, I think that would be a very interesting challenge because it would be definitely a technical challenge as well of deciding, okay, we have assets. How do we all hook this up in the game so it actually confuses the player or whatever? That sounds like a very, very fun technical challenge.
It would be a very fun creative one. So no plans right now, but it could be one in the future. Arc, etc. asks, how do you do proximity chat? I forget. Is there proximity chat in the game right now, or am I mistaken?
I think there is. Proximity chat is interesting because that's a great question. I'm gonna go and let's see, because I can't really show that right off the bat. So let me see if I can do this in sort of a sneaky way on the side. Here we go. I'm just gonna do that, and then you didn't see a thing. Here we go. Voice chat is interesting. This sort of links into the question of dialogue. Because obviously there's music, there's sound effects, there's ambient sound effects, and then there's dialogue, which is the spoken word. Try not to leak challenge. And dialogue can be either proximity audio, or it could be just NPCs saying things, and that's where we can actually make use of another thing that FMOD provides us. Because if you think about it, NPCs have a lot of things to say. And if you made an individual event for every single thing that they have to say, you would be creating a lot of events, and it would just become crazy. Because if you change something like the spatialization or a certain effect on one of the events, you have to change it on all of them. Now, fortunately, there are like preset effects that help you do that, where it synchronizes across all of them, but still not nice. You have just tons of events. It's just, it's no good. And so Fmod allows us to use something called a programmer instrument, which is basically here I've just got, this is the event for the guard. Super simple. All it does is just spatialize the sound and then apply some attenuation and occlusion specific for dialogue. And then in here, it's got a programmer event. So if I play this, there we go, it just plays that. But in game, what happens is when we play this event, it actually, the sound engine lets us know, hey, here is an event, or rather, here's an instrument that you can put any sound you want into. Do you want to put another sound into it? And then we can specify a sound to put into here at runtime. So rather than making a bunch of events with like lost sight, a target found, resuming, whatever, we can just make this one event and play this one, and then the code specifies what specific voice line it plays in any specific location, in any specific situation. And that's basically how that works. And we can take this to another level with proximity audio. Proximity audio sort of happens a bit inside FMOD, a bit outside of FMOD, because what the special problem with it is that you have to take input from a microphone and somehow put it into FMOD and also transmit it to all other players that you're playing with. And so what happens is that there exists a sound buffer, which is basically like a little storage that stores sound that's being fed into it, that you write into this buffer when you speak for proximity audio. You just speak into this buffer and it writes all of that data of you speaking into a buffer. And then that buffer is replicated over the network, being sent to the servers and all to each individual clients that you're playing with. And they read the information out of that buffer, turn it into a consistent sound, and then they play a voice chat event where they then hook that sound that they read out of the buffer that they got from the network into a programmer instrument at runtime. So I hope that makes some sense. But basically, yeah, it's really clever. You write all of the audio input that you're getting from the microphone, you put it into a bundle, you send it over the network, someone else gets it, reads the information out of it, starts this event, and then plucks the information that it got out of the network bucket into this event, and it plays the voice from the other player. And that's basically how voice chat works.
Oh,
It's a really clever use of programmer instruments. Rather than saying, okay, we're going to pump in a voice line that's pre-recorded, we're pumping in audio that's coming to us live over the network.
huh. Who knew such engineering for such a seemingly simplistic feature? So we do have another. You're gonna love this question from Duncan RDF. Have you considered doing whispers in the style of the first Hellblade game, with voices in your head coming from multiple directions? So I don't know if that's been discussed yet, but I guess hypothetically, let's not confirm or deny if there is like a Hellblade section or a Turtle Darkness section. But let's say you were going to do that. How would you go about it?
The it's a simple answer or a complicated answer. It all depends on what exactly you want. I don't know the specific reference that you're talking about,
Oh,
but if you want
I'm
to have
surprised.
whispers emerge from certain locations in the map, for example, you would build a system that allows you to specify different points in the map from which to play these sounds. But if you don't want that sort of complexity, and sometimes you don't, you can use something a bit more simple, which I also have not. I've actually touched on it a little bit. I showed it briefly, but I didn't really go into it. Fmod has another sort of instrument. This is the really nice thing about Fmod, because you can just make things happen. so nicely. It has another instrument in it called the scatter instrument. And what that is basically you give it a list of sounds that it can play, and then you can specify a certain time interval and a certain distance around you, as well as some other things, for it to play those sounds. And so for whispers, what you might do, let's see actually, because this is actually very akin to something we would do for ambience. Like, for example, if you're trying to place birds in the world, we might go to soundscapes. Let's see, outdoor. Here we go. Daytime blend. Let's go into forest dusk. How about that? This is the soundscape for forest at dusk. And in here we just have sort of a base layer, which is just some wind and stuff. Hope the volume is okay on that. Let me actually turn that up a little bit. There we go. And then down here we also have scatter instruments that distribute cicadas, for example. So you can actually hear it a bit. I'm going to turn up even more. So we're here to the right. And now every 5 to 16 seconds, it's going to spawn another one within a 55 to 350 meter radius around you. So right now it's sort of playing there. There's another one that just coincidentally happened to spawn in kind of the same location. If I turn this up, we're going to get another one, I hope. Yeah, that one's sounding more slightly towards the left. And we can use that not just for loops like that, we can use it for one-shots. So let's see here if we can get it to happen. It's not really playing, I don't know why. Might be spawning too far away. Oh, come on. There we go. So there's a bird, and then every so often. I guess just sort of to demonstrate, but we can use this exact same approach for whispers that appear around the player. Like instead of pumping bird noises into here, we can put whispers into here and spatialize them around the player and have them happen at a certain frequency with certain time delays, and then actually automate that as well, because this spawn rate right here determines just how often things actually spawn, and we can add automation to this. So now I can add a curve. I don't know, I'll just go to generic and say density, and I can now draw a curve into here, and now we can, in the game, from the code, we can specify what the density is, and that's going to turn up the spawn rate or turn it down. So if you want the whispers to get more intense, we can just change this parameter, and we're going to get more and more whispers. And then we want it to die down, we just turn this parameter back down, and the whispers are going to slowly get less and less. But yeah, so same thing that we use for birds or for creatures around you, or for like little ambient hits around you, we might use for whispers, we might use for other sort of things.
Interesting.
You can get really creative with these things.
Because like I'm surprised you haven't heard, as an audio guy, person, you haven't heard of Hellblade Sensua's Sacrifice, where whatchamacallit, it's like a kind of like a action character game, but the big selling point is that like the character is kind of like going schizophrenic. So what'll happen is like you'll be stuck with like moments where it goes, and then the idea is it's supposed to be like super immersive. It was done by Ninja Theory. What are they famous for? They did the one second, Ninja Theory. You know, they always kind of like do like highbrow character action games. What is a game I could reference? They did the Devil May Cry remake. They also did Enslaved, Odyssey to the West, and Heavenly Sword. That's what I was getting confused. There's Hellblade and Heavenly Sword.
Oh.
And Hellblade: Senua's Sacrifice was kind of like their attempt to try and do like a really highbrow character action game.
I'll have to look into that. When I think of whispers in video games, I mean, obviously there's a bunch of them, but one of my favorite ones is from, I forget what the game, I think it was called Black and White or something. It's a really old sort of game,
Oh
but after a long
yeah,
time
yeah.
playing, it start whispering your name. That's fun.
That was the god game, right? Where you could either be a good god or a bad god, and you'd have like this like Tamagotchi creature that you'd like raise up to be your kaiju beast.
I think so.
Um, that whole
I might be mistaken, but I definitely remember those whispers where it's like whispers your name, and it's like, ooh,
ooh.
okay, I don't like that.
That is well, that was a great overview of like how you could achieve whispers in the game, and what it, because people think that that would be a fantastic sound effect to kind of like add that immersive horror element. um there is also
I
another
love
question.
whispers. It's like my favorite.
They are really immersive. So we do have another question from our Russian gentleman. Will there be added lines for the character? For example, when you are hit by a monster, he can say, "I'm hurt" or "I need help." That is a good question. Are there plans for like a player dialogue? For like the player character to like respond back?
I have no idea. I don't think that's necessarily my decision to make. Um, yeah, I don't know. I have no idea.
So we will have to see. That is to be determined if the player will get voice lines. Um, so I'm just kind of curious. What has your journey been with SCP? How did you get into SCP?
I think it all probably started with SCP-087-B was probably my first sort of SCP experience. And it was sort of all harkening back to the day of being a child, and because I grew up sort of alongside Markiplier in a way, not to say him as a person, but his YouTube career. And so in the early days, there was a lot of playing SCP-087-B or playing SCP Containment Breach, and that's sort of what drew me into the whole thing, and just sort of spun from there. Um, and it's kind of incredible that some of that stuff is still alive nowadays. It's sort of, I feel like in recent years it's sort of moved into the background a bit, especially the classics like Containment Breach and 087B. Um, but that's fine. Gotta make way for the new. But yeah, if anyone, I mean, obviously everyone here is probably aware of them, but for nostalgia's sake, give them another watch. Some of that early stuff of like the early stages of those games are very interesting to look at sometimes. I don't remember what the first version I saw of Containment Breach was, but it was one of the earlier ones where it still had like a different old man model and everything, and there's creepy things to that even. So, but yeah, I was mostly getting into it through just sort of YouTube videos and the games, and then that expanded into the actual articles themselves, and then readings of those articles. Talking about Volgan or Tat's top tips. I think it was Tat's top 10. I forget, but they had some great stuff, and so that's the sort of stuff that I would binge.
Well, that's so interesting to hear that like Markiplier was like your entry gateway to the SCP universe. Well, I assume that kind of like creators like that did a long way in terms of getting more people to check it out, and probably helped a lot of getting people onto the wiki. So did that kind of like get you to reading the articles, or did that just kind of like like the cool creepypasta nature of like the kind of characters in the universe?
I liked the whole format of the articles. I thought that was very unique. just the way it's so scientific. It's like it's just unique in a way from anything else because that I mean that was the high time of creepypasta and like Jeff the Killer and all those sort of things. But this was just such a unique approach that it's like yeah, no, the video games definitely were like a gateway drug, I guess, to reading the articles and looking more at those. And following along with and obviously the nice thing was always all those readings that were out there where you could just get sort of exposed to a bunch of different articles rather than it's sort of like audiobooks almost. I liked it so much. um I'm a big fan of audiobooks, so and SCP audiobooks are great. um
That does help a lot with getting SCP out there. But almost sometimes I kind of wonder if that hurts it, in the fact that like it's really easy to like dismiss SCP like 94 or 90, the one that everyone loves, the smiling guy, 96, as like, oh, that's just a creepy pasta creature, versus like this is its own unique thing, versus just being like a Slender Man thing.
mm,
But at the same time, like having those kind of creatures take off is like what makes SCP as sort of internet based Creative Commons collaborative art project so interesting, is that it gives infinite opportunity to create an infinite number of things, and you never quite know what's going to stick, what's going to like, who's going to draw the ultimate version or make the best video game version of this character that'll somehow make it an icon that everyone loves. There is no formula for virality and success. There's just building on the foundations of what came before, and you never know what'll come up from the primordial ooze, which is so fascinating because there's so much of different aspects of SCP culture.
yeah, I think one last thing that I guess I'd have to add on this is just to add to the whole Markiplier thing, because obviously that was crazy. It not crazy. It was cool watching him sort of play Containment Breach and stuff when I was younger, and having that get me into the whole thing. So I will just say that it was incredibly sort of rewarding to see him play some like a project like SCP Unity that I had worked on, and the only reason that it was even in the place of being able to work on it is because he got me into the whole SCP thing. So it's kind of crazy to to see someone like that started the whole thing for you, and now they're playing something that you worked on.
Oh
So
my god, that must have been like such
hats
a
off to Markiplier.
that must have been such an amazing experience for you to like this thing is what got you into SCP, and then you get to see like one of the big creators who helped push the culture forward playing your thing. I didn't realize. So Unity is playable, it just wasn't finished.
Yeah, it was playable. It was coming out with updates. People could play it from the start all the way till the end. I think you could still download it. I'm not here to advertise for it, obviously.
Oh,
But
it's
yeah, it was just never finished because just canned. Not by the choice of the development team, but just I guess the lead just was fed up with it. So it never went anywhere from there. So, but it is still available. The last version of it, 0.7 or something.
well, it's cool that it was playable enough, but like that, even if it didn't become what it was kind of meant to be, the fact that it was playable enough that Markiplier himself got to play it, and you got to watch Markiplier play it, that must have been like, spiking the endorphins, the ultimate form of, just kind of feeling validated in your choices and seeing things come full circle. So, congratulations on that. I can only imagine how good that must have felt.
Yeah, no, it was amazing. I think the only sad part of it was that there was like an Easter egg that I added to the game specifically for him that he did find, but he had to cut it out of the video because it would have given him like a copyright strike because of
Oh,
the YouTube system changing and stuff.
oh
It was like a reference
no.
to an old like an old music track that he used in his older videos where he was like talking very personally to the camera and stuff like that. And so I put that in, like not the actual clip, but I kind of reorchestrated it and put it in as an interaction, but he had to cut it out because apparently just between then and that moment, the YouTube copyright system had changed so much that it was just not possible for him to play that track anymore.
Well, that's still amazing. That like that. How do you know that he like even got to see it though? Did you find out offline or from another source or?
No, I think he cut like right before and to right after. And he actually said in the video like I have to edit that out because I can't play that anymore.
Ah, that's such
I
a
don't remember
shame.
which one of the videos that was a bummer. But it's fine.
The cursed YouTube copyright bots getting in your way. Gosh, darn, damn it.
Yeah, well, you gotta be aware of that too. And I thought it would be cool, but because it was not the actual clip, it was like a reorchestration of it, but nope. So that's something else to watch out for. Don't Easter egg things necessarily that might be with copyright.
Yeah, there's always you got to worry about the DCMA nowadays. The Duncan RDF has another comment. The cool thing about Hellblade Whispers is that the dialogue changes depending on what you're doing, taunting you for being lost or taking damage, telling you to turn back, worried for your safety. I guess is that possible to do hypothetically in Fmod? So let's say they wanted to have psycho whispers that would like reflect different states of the game, like if you take damage or if you're low health, would that be possible?
That would be another case of not doing it purely inside of Fmod. It's where you would set up Fmod either multiple events or one event that sort of switches between these sort of things because you can sort of change the distribution of what sounds play specifically inside of Fmod. But in order to actually get the context, that's something that you would then go and program a system for inside of Unreal Engine itself to be like, okay, well, what parameters do we investigate and look at to determine what state the player is currently in, whether they're lost or something like that, or if they're taking damage and stuff like that. And then we communicate that through parameters or other events to Fmod, and then the sound will adapt accordingly inside of Fmod based on the values of the parameters that we pass in. So it's always that sort of dance, that sort of ballet, depending on what it is. Sometimes you can just get away with doing it purely inside of Fmod, and sometimes you need to have that hand-in-hand sort of communication between a system that you've conceived inside the engine and Fmod.
So it is doable. It is possible. That is fantastic to hear.
Oh yeah.
So, all right, we have been going for 3 hours. Are there any other aspects? It seems like you have given us a very thorough education on sound. Are there any other aspects you'd like to delve in before wrapping up? Is there any other thing you'd like to showcase?
Ooh, that's a tough question. There isn't actually, I guess, it's not to say that what I've shown is everything there is to know. But I have shown a good load of some of the basics and some of the tools that we use to make the audio happen. There's a bunch of things that I could go into, like, okay, so how do we actually automate compressors and effects on the mixing bus on the mixing bus structure, depending on, so we duck certain sound effects in certain situations. How do we get that to happen? How do we gather focus from layers to listen to certain sound effects? How do we cut through the mix? Really, that's another huge kind of worms that you can go into. But I feel like that would probably sort of explode beyond the frame of this particular stream. So maybe that's, and also it'll probably be more interesting to look at that when we're a bit more in the clear, because some of this stuff concerns new content that I don't know if I can even show. So you'll have to stay tuned for that. But if at any point, we're gonna make a lot of progress. Oh, something that I didn't mention yet. This is a great that just came back to me so suddenly. Occlusion. That's a thing that I sort of touched on the start, where it's like, okay, we can muffle a sound depending on a occlusion parameter.
Ooh.
That's something that I should say is something that we are working on, because the system right now, as it exists, works fine in terms of the context of like, okay, all of these sounds are happening in a different room, and I'm not in that room, so it's all muffled. Works great, but it is a little oversensitive sometimes, as some people might have noticed during gameplay, whereas you stand behind a tiny pillar and the whole sound just kind of dies off and goes away. That's a huge other system that I could go into, but what I should say is that that is something that we have on our docket to majorly overhaul. So right now the occlusion for 0.15 hasn't changed all too much, so you might still notice that sometimes it's just a bit overly aggressive and just gets a bit weird like that. But we are aware of it and we're already thinking of ways in order to solve this. And so in the future, maybe 0.16, we'll see. I can't give a timeline on that, but one can hope we will have a much better system that can distinguish between the sound is properly behind a wall and this is just behind a small pillar that's blocking our view of the sound source. It's a huge topic that is, it seems easy to describe. Oh, well, just check if it's behind a big wall or behind a pillar. But again, Fmod doesn't have all that information, and sometimes the game world is also a bit more complicated than it might seem. So it's not as easy as just saying, okay, try to trace a line from point A to point B and see if it's obstructed. We actually have to do a bit more with it in order to get an accurate sort of rendering of the soundscape in terms of occluding sounds. So yeah, not too much for 0.15 on that, but it will definitely improve a lot in the very near future. So I'm very excited for when we get to premiere that to the world, I guess.
Ooh, that will be most definitely exciting, and I look forward to having you back. I always like to, I go through like a rotation where it's like I don't want to pull on the same people just so I can let you do your fine work. But I would definitely love to have you back once that's out in the world and you could talk about it. Although we do have another question from Bobcat Power. Can we see some of your music? Do you do music?
I do music. I have not written any music for Afray specifically yet. But I guess if you're just interested in my music in general, I do a couple of different things. Obviously, I wrote the soundtrack for SCP Unity, which is sort of this horror cinematic sort of thing. But then I also just do other things, character themes for D&D and things like that.
Uh,
It's on my YouTube channel, so if you want to head over there, or you can check it out on Spotify. I sound like I hate the way this sound, because it's like, do you know those DJs in like clubs that like they're sort of all they do is plug their Spotify? It's like, I don't know. I'm
uh,
just thinking of that. Like, hey, guys, like the music's playing and they just turn the music down. They're just their microphones are going, "Hey guys, check me out on Spotify. This song is out fresh right now." I hate that. I hate that so much. I'm realizing I'm sounding a bit like that.
Now people want to know what is your YouTube channel. But give me the link. Put the link in the chat. They want to hear your songs. And while you're getting that link ready, Callan stuff also had another question. What was the most difficult sound or set of sounds to implement?
That's a very good question. It's difficult to answer because everything has a different difficulty level depending on what it is. Because sometimes the difficulty is because you have to code a weird system around it. Sometimes the difficulty is because you have to sort of make sure the event works correctly. I think the most difficult to implement sounds, this is sort of a personal opinion almost, um, is once you get into the weeds of dynamic music. Because it's not a sound, right? I'm kind of bending the rules of the question, but in terms of implementing as events, dynamic music is probably the most difficult thing that you could be doing, because it is a technical as well as a creative exercise in not just trying to structure everything, but also making sure it all links together sort of with the game in a good way. You have to imagine that you don't want if you want it to be truly dynamic, you don't want just to write. You can easily write a piece of music and put it in and just have it loop. That's fine. But if you want the music to change depending on whether there's enemies around you, or if you're separated from your teammates, or if there's like a big thing happening and all that, you have to sort of conceptualize that all in your head and structure out your music in the composition process with all of those things in mind, thinking about, okay, all of the individual sections and how we get from one point to the other, and then taking all that and putting it into the into Fmod itself, hooking it all up, and then trying it and seeing how it works. And if it doesn't work, you go back to the drawing board, and then cool, it's an Fmod, that's great, you can tweak the parameters in Fmod, but now those parameters have to actually be changed by the game engine somehow. So you now have to write a system that tells the game, okay, hey, based on these situations that are going on, if these enemies are here or whatever category you can do whatever. You can measure based on distance or how many are around you in a certain distance, or you can have it be scripted from somewhere else. You have to have all of that consolidated and send all of that information in some sort of standardized way to Fmod so it can actually automate the music as it plays. So I feel like that's probably, if you're trying to do it good and you're trying to be very detailed about it and you're doing it right, that's the most difficult thing, in my opinion, to implement. Is just the whole, because it's such a thorough exercise of everything: creative, composition, the actual Fmod implementation, and then getting the code to communicate all of these information bits so that it actually plays the way you want it to play. That is something that really challenges you. But hopefully, in the end, the product that you get is really nice.
And
High,
that
high sort of high stakes, high reward.
Oh, so someone's commenting, Moobles in YouTube is saying, "Ooh, their music is good." I guess you've got some banging tracks up there. I look forward to listening to it. Just out of curiosity, what kind of music do you make? Or is it like if you had to pick a game, what game is like the kind of like the music that you do? It kind of fits the most with? Is it kind of like stuff like indie stuff like Celeste, or is it more like Undertale? Is it more like Call of Duty?
It varies. I should say I just send the link into the Discord chat right here. So I guess if that is intended to be distributed, there you go. It really, I like to sort of occupy sort of a wide space of things. Uh, I think I have a sort of style that I kind of go into a lot, which is I like to write a lot of orchestral music. Um, so utilizing the orchestra and using acoustic instruments in that way. Recently, I've been experimenting a lot with adding more sort of synthetic layers to that. Um, but within that, I vary things depending on mostly the project that I'm working on, because a lot of the music that I write is for specific projects or just things that I have going on. I struggle to write music for music's sake. So, for example, for SCP Unity, it would be writing a lot of music that sort of, in some cases, is the more ambient thing, sometimes evokes certain dread or horror, and other times, sort of leaning into lighter notes, which at the time were sort of unexplored in SCP. So that was always fun. But then for things like I do a bunch of game jams with my friends. I would lean into completely different things. Like for one game jam, it was sort of this. We were working on a game where you're sort of this worker drone in like an Amazon fulfillment center, essentially. And so rather than trying to write anything complicated or anything that's even good, I leaned into the sort of like stock music, like realm of just repeat the same chords and melodies over and over. And I wrote a track in that style. And for another one, I wrote sort of a more fun, upbeat, jaunty thing, which is more focused on synth. It all depends on what the project calls for. And for D&D, it also depends on the campaign, for example, or the character itself. I like to base my work a lot around the specific moments and the specific things and the specific notes that have to be hit in order to resonate with a situation or a character or things like that. So, but yeah, I don't write rock music. There's a lot of music I don't write. I think I'm bad at writing electronic music. I'm bad at writing, even though I love electronic music. I'm bad at writing it. I don't really ever write sort of just normal songs with lyrics or anything like that. It's always to some degree some sort of cinematic soundtrack sort of thing.
So
I guess that's just my MO.
So you like when you're like looking at music, you're like, I want to listen to the hits of Two Steps from Hell, and get that epic trailer music juice flowing. You ever hear of Two Steps from Hell?
Yeah. Yes. There were some of the first people, like, I mean, growing up and sort of getting into the whole music composing thing, like they were huge for me. I still listen to some of their stuff. It's just so energetic. I love it.
It is like the most pump you up for like the big game kind of like trailer music. Bobcat Power.
Yes.
Bobcat
trailer music is sometimes just some of the most fun thing to write because you just kind of get to go crazy. You just let's make it bigger and bigger and bigger. It's just
yeah, and it's amazing how like a good trailer song can like just completely, even if the movie's bad, if the trailer music's like really good, it doesn't really matter. Like I remember in the early 2000s, what was that song from Requiem for a Dream, Requiem for a Tower that was like used in every trailer? You know, it was like da-na-na-na, 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 da-na-na, da-na-na-na. It was overused, but I did love that track for how well it suited. I remember like the Lord of the Rings Two Towers had that in their trailers. Like, oh, this is the shit. But we
Lord
do.
of the Rings is such a good soundtrack. I should just say on the note of that.
It,
such a good soundtrack.
It is amazing how well those films have held up in all fronts. Soundtrack, visual effects, they really have like aged stupendously. Bobcat Power asks, are there any plans for you to compose any music for 5K?
I don't know if there's any plans. I'm definitely available to do so. So if so we do have a couple of people who do excellent music, and so I reckon they will probably be called on first because I do have a very full plate. I have a ton of stuff to do, but I'm definitely not closed off to saying no. I'm not gonna do any music for 5K. So if it becomes requested, I will, and I might also, because I have a personal interest in the whole thing as well. So if there's ever any sort of music tracks that are currently being worked on, I definitely would like to sort of participate. Maybe not necessarily maybe not directly in the composition, but at least in sort of conceptualizing it and making sure that it fits that standard of being cool and dynamic.
Well, I know there's no better place for trailer music than SCP-5K, and I certainly hope that the opportunity arises so you can lend your talents. So I think we're nearly at 3.5 hours. We've been going for a great amount of time. Lightning round, last minute to get your audio questions before we close up shop and let this wonderful person get some sleep because they've got a full day. They've taken off their Sunday, and they probably need to get back in the music minds and the sound minds tomorrow. So thank you so much for finding the time to do this.
No problem at all. It's been great fun.
Anyone
apprehensive, I will say, but it turned out great.
I like to think of it as like going into a pool. It's like, oh my god, it's so cool. But once you're in the pool, it's a wonderful temperature. I love it. So anyone, the last 5 minutes, give me your sound questions. Give me your sound. I'm looking at the YouTube chat. I'm looking at the Discord chat. Give me your sound things, and we will give them to Corvus before they bid us adieu. Come on. Let's see. Up. Me and you checkers after the event. You know what, Bobcat Power? You send me a link to a multiplayer checkers. I'll see what I can do. I do have, some cleaning up and some chores I have to do here. But I'll see if I can get you that checkers game. It's been a long time that I've played, but I'll play in checkers. And who knows? Maybe someday you can convince me to play you in my favorite RTS game of all time, Warcraft 3. Man, I love Warcraft 3. Did you ever play Warcraft 3 back in the day?
Nope.
I would highly.
A lot I missed out on.
Well, I'm sure you had better games to play. I just love Warcraft 3 because they added that hero system where you could level up your heroes while you're building your base and doing your other RTS stuff. That was like such an addictive thing to have. Any other questions? No, it seems like these people have been satiated. They are waiting for the other cool stuff. And with that, we will bid you thank you for coming out on this Sunday. So there will be a movie night next weekend, and announcing right here for you, first here, I have got the confirmation. I've got the art. We will be doing on Thursday, August 22nd, level design with Joel. He has never been in one of these sessions. This will be his first. We will be going into the level design of SCP-5K and the update 0.15. So be there. Check it out and take a look at the level. And there is one super secret event I am working on. We will see if it comes to fruition. I cannot talk about it, but if it does, you better get excited. It's really, really cool. A huge part of update 0.15 that I think is the coolest element of what's coming in. So I look forward to being able to share that with you once it is up and running. But hope you had a good afternoon, and this helped you relax on your Sunday as you get ready for the week and enjoy the last few gasps of summer as we head into the fall. Corvus, any final thoughts?
I like video games.
That is what unites us all. The love of video games, the love of gaming. Oh, God, what was that PlayStation mascot? PlayStation 3 mascot. What was his name? Kevin. There we go. Kevin Butler. Ages ago, Sony did this mascot in their failing PlayStation 3, when they were kind of declining and losing space. They came up with one brilliant thing, and that was Kevin Butler, the fake VP of PlayStation, and he was just like a dude. He was just like the chill dude who loved gaming, and he had this great speech in the now deceased E3 where he talked about that is the thing that unites us all, the love of video games, the ability to go into different worlds, experience different pastimes, to accomplish different things, to have that symbiotic relationship between gameplay, sound, art, graphics, storytelling, gameplay mechanics that creates a beautiful synergy that is just not available in any other medium. So thank you for being here. Thank you for the love of games, and may the love of games propel us forward to ever new heights as we inch our way towards the 1.0 release.
Hell yeah.
All right, have a wonderful afternoon, and thank you for being with us.
Thank you.
I know, the one thing I'm always the worst at is, like, doing a goodbye, because, like, you never